And we are live with today's pre-show of our 220-1102 Core 2A Plus study group. We are just getting set up. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are just getting things ready to go here. We have a lot of things to go through today. A lot of new questions, a lot of good content, a lot of interesting things. And there's always good questions in the after show. Thanks for joining us. You know what I haven't figured? I didn't set up my the Q&A. I didn't set up the Q&A link properly. You're going to an old Q&A link, so that's not going to work for you. See, this is why we do a setup at early, so I can go through and fix all of those things that I don't have right to begin with. Let's do that. QA, and let's see what the QA number is for this one. There it is. You're going to the old one right now. That's not going to help you. That is not going to help you. Hope everybody's doing well. We're going to put in the new number, which is 131-886-067. There, that's so much better. Let's see if that works now. If we go to professormesser.com/QA, let's see if that works. That one says Core 2. That's what I was hoping for. That's probably not what you want right there. That is not good. Let's try this. There we go. That's a little better. Always good to see that. Let's keep going on this list. We can exit out of that. We got a lot. We got a lot going on today. There's activity. Yeah, I see people showing up. See, when you get the link right, now we can actually, well, you see the link now. Now you can see it. It's right there on the screen. My camera is kind of wonky, isn't it? I feel like we're tilting this way. I feel like I should adjust. I'm not sure. I moved some things around. We were doing some work in the studio and something got jostled. Something got adjusted. That's okay. We need to pop out the chat because I can't see the chat over there. Hey, chat, pop it out. That's good. Pop it over here. That looks good. We'll go to stream settings, stream help. That all looks good. Good. Hope everybody's doing well. We have some good questions for you today. We will talk about retirement dates and A+ and all that stuff coming up shortly. We'll talk about that during the first 5 minutes or so of the live stream. Live stream gets started at the top of the hour. This is the pre-show where I am just trying to manage my microphone. I need to tighten this up. Has a hex screw I need to tighten up. What are the brand names, all these monitors all around here? There's all kinds of good stuff here, isn't there? That's a Dell monitor. That's a Dell monitor. It's their 4K monitor. Relatively inexpensive. And I rarely use them, but they're there because for when I do the live streams and when I'm recording, normally those are turned off. In front of me is an Apple display. I'm not sure which one. Let's find out, shall we? Let's go to About this Mac. We'll go to more info. We will have a look at my display. What display am I running here? We are running a Mac Studio display here. This is an LG Ultra something. LG Ultrafine. Ultrafine. That LG is Ultrafine. That's what I got here. I bought the LG Ultrafine a long time ago. It's a 5K Thunderbolt monitor, which is why I got it, because everything is just Thunderbolt here. And if I had had the choice, I probably would have gotten another Apple display so these would match up and I could use the same color schemes. The whole thing would be a little more seamless, a little more easier, but it's okay. Once we set it up, we're okay. And that's kind of it. Looking at screens, we're definitely like this. I feel like I should stand up and fix this because I feel like we're all leaning to the left. Nothing like real time to be able to do that, though. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what trouble we can get into. And You know, I'm not really sure that helped at all. But there we are. That's where we are. I'll fix that after. That'll be afterwards. Well, I will mess around with that. We got about 4 minutes to go. I am still using the Shure in my ear, but only on one side. It's only on one side of the ear. It's on the left. And it really was that way. I made it that way because it was just easier. Actually, I think the right side broke. And I literally bought a new set. But while the right side was broken, I just kept using the left. And then I realized, wow, I kind of like hearing what's going on in the rest of the room. So now it's only one side for my in-ear monitor, which is fine. It works great. So now I'm wondering, why have I been listening in two ears all this time? So that's it. Why do I have so many? I guess you're referring to my monitors. What a fine question. That's a great question. Thanks for asking. I don't have an answer. I do not know, but that's just what it is. Okay. Let's check our cash. We're looking good. We're good online. That's it. Interestingly, from a monitor perspective, I was thinking about adding another one. In fact, you don't see the television that's back there over on this side. So that's it. What is up with the map of the U.S.? It's a map of the world. All of this is the world. The U.S. is this tiny little part right here, down here. This is our sort of our virtual pin in the map. There it is. Our virtual pin that we could put in depending on where you're from. Got some folks in India, some folks in the UK, folks in the United States, lots of folks in Canada. So it's just a way you can follow that link on your screen and put your virtual pin in there just to say, yeah, that's where you are. We can make that all work. All right. What else? I think we're recording. Can't really see it here because of where I got the camera, but we are recording. Aren't we? Yes, we are. We are recording. And we are in pretty good shape here with everything else. We just now need to get the live stream. The top of the hour needs to show up. We'll figure it out. We'll make it happen. So next on our list is live stream. We'll do our first hour where I will ask you questions. And if you have a question for me for the second hour, there's a tab at the top of your screen. If you follow this link that's behind me at professormesser.com/QA, you can put questions in there for that to happen. So you've got plenty of things to do. We'll cover those questions in the second hour. So if something comes to mind, there's a few questions that have come through here and there, and that they've just gone by because I'm here trying to prep for this live stream. So that's it. We'll figure out the details anyway. Make all of this work out just fine. We will get things going. This setup has been a long time in work. It is one that does provide me with everything on the desk now. So everything that I need to stream and broadcast is all on the desk. It's in the desk. There's two 19-inch racks on the left and right side that are soundproofed. And then there is everything on the front and two lights here. The lights behind me, which we haven't looked at yet. Does that look okay? Yeah, that looks pretty good. Am I in the center? No. There we go. That's a little better. That's it. If you want to know more about all of these things that we have here in the studio, you can go to professormesser.com/studio, or you can, of course, go to the other on the main page. There's a studio link there. So it'll tell you about the mixer and the video switcher and the microphone and the lights and all those things. So you'll figure it out. Okay, what is next? We're at the top of the hour. I think we could probably do a live stream at this point. What do you think? I think so too. I've got questions. We'll see how this goes. Larry, our top of the hour, we should now bring up our keynote. We should look for a green light. Do we have a green light? Yes, we do. There we go. Slides are up. This is up. And we are ready to go, except for my watch making noise, which we need to fix right now with a do not disturb. And then we can get started. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August 2024 Professor Messer 2201102 Core 2 A+ study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And if you've been paying attention to those objectives, then you should be able to answer along with us as we are here live. We will also show you the answers, so you don't even have to be here live if you don't want to. You can always follow along with us. But if you are nice enough to have joined us, we would love it if you were to join us live. You simply visit this URL that's on your screen, pop open a new browser window, and go to professormesser.com/QA. That is the way that you can participate if you are here live. And again, if you're not, simply just wait for the answers. We will show you the answers as they are coming up as well. In fact, I have a question here from last month's study group just to see how well you remember this information. This question we call our rewind question, and it asks, a Linux administrator is running the df command. Which of the following would most likely happen next? The possible answers are install a new application, shut down the system, restart a daemon, modify a configuration file, or query a DNS server. Now, our standing rule, of course, is please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will come back to this question in just a bit. Let's see if you remember what that answer was from last month. Well, we do one of these study groups every month. Thank you for joining us this month as well. We also have other things going on throughout the month. There's so much activity going on right now that you will absolutely want to join us on our social media sites, absolutely on our YouTube. If you have not yet been to our YouTube channel, it would be great if you could visit there and subscribe. You can do that by visiting professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have daily A+ pop quiz questions available on our account formerly known as Twitter. I guess that's the best way to describe it. That service now known as X, but it still is professormesser.com/Twitter. And of course, we have the same questions available with a pretty picture at professormesser.com/Instagram. So you've got plenty of choices to find us online. We're other places as well. You can find us at /Facebook, /LinkedIn. Simply put those in there and you'll be able to find us out there somewhere. Sometime during this first hour, I will give you instructions on how you can earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU for watching this video. This is a CEU that you can get whether you're watching it live or whether you're watching it on the replay. So keep listening in. Sometime during this first hour, you'll get instructions. The instructions are just as important as anything else. It's part of the whole idea. So make sure you're familiar with that as we go through. Today, we're going to talk about the A+ Core 2 exam. This is specifically the second of the two exams, the 2201102. These were released in April of 2022, which means that we expect these to be retired somewhere around the end of 2025. We don't have an exact date yet, but as soon as CompTIA provides that, we will update our information on this side. But I think that's probably pretty close. It's got to be plus or minus a month or two, right? So you've got plenty of time. You got more than a year as we sit here today in August of 2024 to take both of these exams and pass them, which is plenty of time for you. These exams are 90 minutes in length. You are on a 220 on the 1102. You must get a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. It's an interesting scale and it's an interesting scoring system. But if you take both of those and pass them, your certification is good for 3 years. So these are two different dates. We have these dates at the top that describe when you can take the exam. But once you pass the two exams, really doesn't matter what they do with the exam dates. You're good for 3 years once you pass that exam. And of course, you can renew your certification again without ever taking these exams again. So this will probably be the only time you would ever step through the Core 1 and the Core 2 exams. These exams themselves cover different types of information. Last week, we had our Core 1 study group. You can always check our replays and our playlists for that. Today, we're going to talk about the Core 2 exam, which consists of operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and organizational procedures. This is also a live stream that will be available to watch on the replay over at YouTube right after we're done. It's automatically added to the list. There's also an audio-only podcast version of this available on our website. You can add it to your favorite podcast listening program by visiting professormesser.com/podcast. It's the best way to do it. We've got on that same link our 2A Plus live streams, our Network Plus, and our Security Plus study groups as well. And if you are on maybe one of your favorite streaming services, maybe you're a Spotify person, our podcasts are already there and they are uploaded there automatically as well. Simply look for Professor Messer over on the Spotify search box. There's also, interestingly enough, if you look at the YouTube video description right now, you won't see any of this, but about a day after this live stream, suddenly timestamps will appear as if by magic in the YouTube video description. It's not magic at all. It's the hard work of my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching the replay. Hey, Lori. She's going through all of this, probably at 2x speed, and putting all of these timestamps for you. So if you've ever seen any of these other crazy videos on YouTube where they've had some type of automated system attempt to give you timestamps, and you've realized this is a horrible way to live, you would be right. We need real people to be able to do real timestamps and make them accurate and find the things that you need to find very quickly. And this is the best way to do it. Thank you, Lori, for doing that. And if you appreciate that in the chat room, give Lori a thanks as well. Also let you know that in our Discord, we have a lot of people that visit every day trying to learn about their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, and other certifications. We would love it if you joined our great community over there, professormesser.com/Discord. Great way to do it. This is also really where I pretty much hang out when we're not here on the live stream. So if you have questions for me or questions for others, or you would like to start your own study group on the Discord, you can certainly do that. We've got all the tools available so that you can manage the entire process and make sure that is one that is the way you would like to run it. Over there, you can find that link, professormesser.com/Discord. Well, if you're in the US or Canada, I'll let you know that when you are ready to take your exams, I can have you take your exam for less money. Now, of course, we do have to pay to take these exams, but I have discounted vouchers available on my site. This is available if you're in the US, Canada, or a US territory. They're available for all of the CompTIA exams. Also let you know that when you buy a voucher from my site, not only are you saving money because it's a discounted voucher, I'm also giving you some extra information absolutely free. It is my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that you cannot buy anywhere. It is only included with my success bundles and if you purchase a voucher from my site. It is a list of all the tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years by taking these exams, not just for the study process, but I have some tips in this book that can help you during the exam itself. All of this is free when you purchase the voucher from my site at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier, which is a Linux administrator is running the df command. Which of the following would most likely happen next? Would that be install a new application, shut down the system, restart a daemon, modify the configuration file, or query a DNS server? Now let's see how you did with this question. We're going to close the poll and see how the answers came in. And very similar to last month, we are all over the place. The plurality of you chose install a new application. That's 36% of you. 26% of you said modify a configuration file. And 20% of you said query a DNS server. Still in double digits, 13% said restart a daemon. And then you have 3%, a mere 3% said shut down the system. Well, I guess the part that's important with this is understanding what in the world the df command does. What is that when you type in df? Df itself stands for disk free. As free as the wind blows. You've got a way to now view how much drive space you have available on all of these different volumes in your Linux file system. That is a Linux command. And if you're trying to figure out, am I out of disk space? Do I have more storage space available? Is there more room on that SSD? This is how you would find that information, by running the df command. Df shows this command by default as number of blocks. I'm not sure that really helps people. This is the number of blocks that are available on that drive. How geeky. It would be better if I was able to view this by number of megabytes, by number of actual storage things that humans would understand. And fortunately, there's a human version as well with df-h shows you information in gigabytes, megabytes. So you can actually understand, this is the -h version right here, so that we can see instead of blocks, we have an actual size. Now those are numbers I recognize. That is something I can understand. So if you're running df, this must mean you're interested in how much space is available on that particular system. And if we look at the 5 different things we could be doing, which one of these would be the best way to look at it? Well, let's see. Shutting down the system. I don't really need a lot of drive space to shut down a system. So the 3% of you that chose that one, unfortunately, chose incorrectly. Restarting a daemon. Again, I don't need a lot of drive space to restart a daemon. So querying my drive space is probably not what I would do first. Querying a DNS server. Again, almost no drive space, if any, is required to query a DNS server. So that is not something I'm worried about drive space. Modifying a configuration file could potentially be important to me from a drive space perspective, but generally configuration files in Linux are really small files. They're really little. They are text files. They're things you can just modify within the file itself. There's not really a lot of drive space that you're using in a configuration file. And that's why this question said, which of the following would most likely happen next? And the 36% of you that said, oh, you're installing a new app. You want to know, do you have enough drive space to install that new app? You would be absolutely correct. That would be the one that really shows the most amount of space that would be used from all 5 of these things. Installing a new app would probably use the most amount of drive space. And so DF would be a perfectly reasonable thing to query before performing the installation itself. Nobody wants to run an installation program for an app and have it tell you you're out of drive space. Plus now you've broken things on your server because you ran out of drive space. So instead, let's check to see if we have enough first by running the df command. And for me, probably the df-h command. So if you answered install a new application, 36% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Well, we have to know a lot about Linux and Windows and Mac OS and other operating systems for our A+ exam. And of course, we need to know everything that's listed in our exam objectives. The exam objectives themselves can give you some perspective of things you need to know for this exam. In fact, everything you need to know is going to be part of your exam objectives. So I have for you a list of things, well, or as we do with all of our initial questions on this live stream, is I want to give you some questions that will simulate what you would get during the exam itself. Now, as some of you know, the first handful of questions you get on your exam are questions that are not multiple choice. The question we just did, that was a multiple choice question. It was a question and there were multiple options to choose from. Even if you didn't know the answer, you had a 20% chance of getting that one right. Even if, in fact, if there were less possibilities on the normal exam, there's usually 4 choices, which means that increases your possibility up to 25%. So what CompTIA does at the very beginning of their exam is they give you questions that have nothing to do with multiple choice. They're any other kind of question. It might be a matching question, a fill-in-the-blank question. They might put you at a command prompt. You may have to put things in a particular order. There's lots of different ways to drag and drop things on the screen. But the thing that you need to keep in mind is that regardless of how they ask the question, it's always going to be referencing information that you've learned from your exam objectives. So don't worry so much about the format. Worry about understanding what these different tools are and how they work. So I have for you, as I do with every new question, first new question on our study groups, is I have a performance-based question for you. This one is a bit of a fill in the blank, but I think a number of you can kind of follow along with me as we go through this. And this is your performance-based question of the month. It is a 3-step or 3-answer question. And I'm really looking for 3 specific commands. Here's the question. It asks, a technician has been asked to help with the cleanup of a malware-infected Windows computer from a remote command line. So you don't have access to the Windows graphical user interface. We're at the command line of this Windows machine, just like the one we see on the screen right here. Here's our command line. And we need to perform the following tasks. They are, as I'm doing this, I'm going to flip it over so that you can actually answer these as I'm putting them in here. The first one is verify that you're on the right computer. Whenever you're at a command prompt, sometimes you don't know. In fact, looking at this command prompt, what's the name of this computer? Are we even on the right device? So before we start changing anything, it might be useful to know that we're actually working on the right machine. You would think that would be a gimme, but so many times in our careers have we sat down at a command prompt and started typing and then thought, am I even on the right computer right now? So that's an important first step. Second step is replace any corrupted core operating system files. It's a single command that allows you to do that. And if you remember the flags for the command, that's even better. In fact, that's preferable in this case. And then lastly, once we're done with that, let's restart the computer. That's what I'd like to do. We would like to restart the computer. So maybe you remember what the command is to do that. So this is what I'm looking for. These 3 commands. If you think you know the answer to these, you need to put them in at the link that you see on your screen. Visit professormesser.com/QA to put your commands in, what those 3 commands are. I'm looking for that on my screen, and you should be able, of course, to put down a number of different options. Now, one of the great things about this particular question is the first one, there's an obvious command that you should be running to be able to figure that out. Replacing corrupted core operating system files, there's really only one command you would use for that one. The last one, you've got a little bit of options available. You got a little bit of leeway, if you will, and we can step through each one of those too as we step through them one by one by one. Now, if you think you know the answer, that's the link on your screen. I just need you to put this in. It's a fill in the blank online. If you were in an actual exam, it might even have you type it in and see what the results are as you're typing these things in. So it just depends on what you've got there. So hopefully you have some ideas of things that you can put in on these links. If you think you know what they are, simply add them. Go to professormesser.com/QA, follow that link over, and you will be able to answer this particular question. This is one that is not too far off the mark of some real world activities. This is one of the things we often are asked to do at the command prompt. Imagine if you're doing all of this at the recovery console, for example. A number of us are very familiar with the recovery console from our exploits from a month ago, dealing with the CrowdStrike issue. The only way to recover on a number of those systems was to reboot into that recovery console. So this may be one of those times where we're in the recovery console. There is no user interface. We have to type these things in ourselves. What would we type in? So a number of you are putting in your answers. I like it when I see the numbers moving up, that a number of you are adding those to the list. So hopefully this is one where you're familiar with what these 3 things might be. And I like that all 3 of these are kind of following a path. This is not an unusual series of tasks. And a lot of people say, I would like some practical examples. I would like some real world ideas of when to use these commands. Well, here is a perfect example of a real world issue that we now need to resolve with all of these different commands. See if you know the answers by inputting them at professormesser.com/QA. You might even try them on your own machine before putting them in. You won't break anything. Well, I guess you could break something if you put in the wrong command, certainly. But if you have the right commands, it won't break anything, although I would probably recommend not going through and performing the last one unless you've got a VM up and running. Virtual machine would be a good way to test this one. You don't want to reboot your machine right in the middle of the live stream. I certainly don't. Nobody wants that from me either. Let's see how you did with this question. This question, of course, asks, a technician has been asked to help with the cleanup of a malware-infected Windows computer from a remote command line. Our first task is to verify that we are on the right computer. So at the command prompt, and you'll notice, although you don't need it for this particular command, I have this open to an administrator command prompt, and we'll see why in just a moment. But you can see it when I put in the command host name. It's all one word. Put in that host name command. It responds back with, oddly enough, the name of the host. the name of this device. So if you're trying to figure out at the command line, you might even have multiple windows open on your screen, and now you're ready to start making changes. And before you make any changes, you might want to type in host name just to make sure that you're seeing the host name that you would expect when you do that. A perfect way to start this process. Okay, we are on the right machine. We're on the Professor Messer machine, which for some reason was infected with malware. Just go with it. Just pretend it happened. And now we want to go to the next step, which is to replace any corrupted core operating system files. There is one command especially useful for situations like this where you are recovering from malware and you're concerned maybe the malware changed something with the operating system itself. So we can run one single command that will scan all of our operating system files, all of those core files, and it will verify that the file that's on our system was the file that was originally installed or that was updated through the official channels. And the way that we would run that is by running the sfc command. sfc, and to include the option to replace any bad files, we would do that with a /scan now, one word. So there's our command, sfc/scan now. It then begins the process. It even tells us here that we are beginning the system scan. This process will take some time. You will get wet. They will tell you before that happens. It will not be a surprise. This will take some time as you go through this. This is where you sit in the front row right next to the dolphin exposition, and they come in and they splash the water and they tell you when you sit down, you will get wet. We're telling you when you start, this process will take some time, and it will take time because it's going through all of these very important system files. It's scanning them and checking the integrity of the files themselves. And once it's done, it will tell you, once it's scanned all of them, that it's complete, and it will say everything's fine, except in this case, where it even tells you Windows Resource Protection found corrupt files and successfully repaired them. For online repairs, details are included in the CBS log file located, and you can see the path to the cbs.log. And for example, gave you a nice long version of that right there. So you could go back later and look at the log files that are located, that log file, and it will tell you everything that was changed. So you will have documentation on here's all of the changes that were made during this configuration, during running that scan now. So that's going to work and be able to tell you if any of those operating system files were modified, and it will fix them for you, which is fantastic. So now that those are fixed, we should probably have the system start working properly with the new files. Well, we can't just tell Windows to use the new file. We have to somehow get everything going again. So we need to restart the computer. So restarting the computer, a perfect selection or choice for that would be, it's kind of hard to see because it fades it out on the screen. Let's zoom up on it. There it is. Shutdown is the command we were looking for. Wait, that shuts it down. I don't want to shut it down. I want to restart it. Well, this is the command to restart it, but you have to use the /R to be able to restart. Now, you could also add other flags onto this. Maybe you don't want to restart now. Maybe you want to restart in 10 minutes so that you can give people time to close out their applications, to save any files. This might be a big server that everybody's accessing. So this might be a good place to put in a particular time frame. And there are flags and variables you can add to this to modify the results of the shutdown command. But with the /R, it's going to restart, so that we might lose connectivity to it because we are remotely connected to this device, but we can check our watch and eventually the system will be back up and running and we can reconnect to it after that. When we type in the shutdown /R command, it tells you you're about to be signed out. Windows will shut down in less than a minute. And indeed it does, shuts down, restarts the system, and then everything's back up and running. So those were the 3 tasks that we asked you to perform at your virtual command line that we have on our screen or in our brains, trying to figure out what we would put into this mix. Verifying we're on the right computer would be the hostname command. Replacing any corrupted core operating system files would require us not just to run the sfc command, but run it with a /scan now That's what adds that additional piece to scan it and fix the problems that it finds. And then lastly, restart the computer. The most succinct version of that would be shutdown/R, but there's some other folks that have submitted some answers in here that add other variables to this, different timings, which is perfectly reasonable and acceptable and counts as a 100% as well. If you got all three of those, then you were able to pass our performance-based question of the week. Well done with that. Hopefully, these are commands you recognize. If these are commands you do not recognize or you were unsure of those flags, please make a note of them. There are a lot of Windows commands we need to know for this exam. Make sure you're familiar with all of them, with the different options that are available or the most common options available. And make sure you understand when you would use these commands, which is really the most important part for this exam. Hopefully that's given you some things to think about. Hopefully you did well on this performance-based question. Now let's shift gears back to a multiple choice-based question. Next we have this one, and this one asks, an MSP has proactively informed a customer of low drive space on a mail server. Which of the following provided this information to the MSP? Would this be VPN, MSRA, SMTP, VNC, RMM? Let's see if I'm able to say that properly this time. An MSP has proactively informed a customer of low drive space on a mail server. Which of the following provided this information to the MSP? VPN, MSRA, SMTP, VNC, or RMM? If you think you know the answer, let me put up the link. There it is, professormesser.com/QA. It's the same link as before. You can just leave your browser on that screen, and that will be there, and you can answer what you think the answer is. A lot of people putting their answers in on this one. This should be a good one. If maybe some of you already work for an MSP. You might already be using technologies like this that would allow you to inform a customer of low drive space on their mail server. Maybe it's something you've already done. Maybe I've ripped this one from the headlines. We'll have to see and see if this is something we can kind of work through. What is the answer to this one? There are a lot of abbreviations as the answers. This is something you will commonly find on the exam, is that they don't want to give too much away. They don't want to explain too much of this, but you still need to understand what these different options are. You think you know the answer? Please answer online at professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to instead visit the link on your screen, punch it in, or if you're here after the live stream, this is on replay, just wait a moment. We'll be with you in just a second. Lock in your brain what you think the answer is, and we will see if you got it right on this particular list. Let's see how we did. This question asks, an MSP has proactively informed a customer of low drive space on a mail server. Which of the following provided this information to the MSP? Would this be VPN, MSRA, SMTP, VNC, or RMM? What did you choose? Can't wait to see. Let's see what you selected. And we can see that 52% of you say the answer is SMTP. We have 22% that say RMM, 21% that say the Microsoft Remote Administration function, MSRA, and then we have VNC and VPN with single digits, 1 and 2% respectively. So the majority of you chose SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, of course, is a protocol that we use to be able to send mail between mail servers. And in this question, this is a managed service provider. That's what the MSP means. That means it's a company that manages systems for other companies. So that's all they do, is they'll manage all of the systems for your company. They'll manage all the systems for another company. They'll manage all the systems for a third company so that you don't have to manage your own systems. They'll do it for you. And this is part of their normal job. They've reached out or sent a note or opened a ticket that said, you got some low drive space on a mail server. Now, normally the MSP is probably also able to clean up the drive space and free that up, but this may be one of those situations where they are monitoring the systems. You're paying them to monitor, but you're not paying them to fix anything. That happens too. So the real question is, what would you use, or what does the MSP use to be able to see this information? Well, the way that they would commonly do this is through a technology known as RMM, We've already talked about managed service providers and what they can provide to you. Well, they need some way to get some visibility into your network, into your systems, into your servers. And the way that they get that visibility is by running remote monitoring and management, RMM, so that they can be at their central location wherever they happen to be in the world and still be able to constantly keep track of how your systems are running. So they might be able to give you some insight into if your operating systems are not patched properly, if you're needing to remotely log in and fix this problem with low drive space, they could do that for you. If they notice something odd going on, like drive space is the issue, they can provide you with feedback, and they can even provide you with inventory information. They usually would have a screen very similar to this one. You can see this is tactical RMM. And you can see there's a listing of servers and devices. Some are domain controllers. There's a laptop. There's a file server. And they're keeping track of all kinds of interesting stats. Right here, I have selected the file server. And you can see all of these different statistics they're monitoring. Disk space check. You can see a ping check, which is coming back as yellow right now. We're seeing a kind of a slowdown in the pings to that device. CPU load, memory checks, script checks, service checks. We've got a lot of things that we could check ongoing with that piece. In this case, what they probably were looking at was a mail server, and it probably came up with a disk space check, probably in the red, if it's getting low enough that they would be contacting you. That is what we would use. It would be your RMM, your remote monitoring and management. So the 22% of you that chose RMM got that one absolutely correct. Well, it would not be MSRA, the Microsoft Remote Administration, or it's effectively a remote desktop function that they can use, but a managed service provider doesn't have time to manually connect with a remote desktop to all of their customers' devices. It would take them forever. Just the one we saw with the RMM had like 6 or 7 servers. It would take you quite a while just to step through all of them. And then on each one of those, what are you going to do? Check drive space and CPU and hope you catch it? That's probably not the most effective way. So would probably not be the remote administration capability. The one that most people chose, though, was SMTP. So you got roped into the problem of the issue was on the mail server. The issue was on that device that handles the mail for that system. But our problem had nothing to really do with mail. It didn't have to do with the delivery of mail or the email addresses that were in use or bounced emails or you got stuck on a spam list or none of those problems. The issue was it's just low on drive space. And so the issue here is not about transferring mails between systems, which is what the simple mail transfer protocol does. It's responsible for taking a mail that's being sent and send it on its way to the appropriate mail server. So there's this communication that takes place that happens with your email systems. Our problem here had nothing to do with email. So it has nothing to do with SMTP. This had to do with how the MSP learned about this problem to start with, and they used a remote management tool to be able to do that RMM. Would also not be VPN. VPN might be a way that the RMM is able to obtain that information, but in many cases, there is no VPN. RMM is already communicating over an encrypted channel. They don't need an additional tunnel set up. And certainly it's not required to be able to identify low drive space on a mail server. So probably not be VPN in a particular case. And then VNC is another remote desktop function. And just like MSRA, that would be a very inefficient way to be able to find this information. The answer we were looking for, and the one that surprised us all, was the 22% of you that got it right. It is the RMM. Being able to use the remote monitoring and management is exactly the correct answer. If you chose that one, you got it absolutely right. Let's see if we can bounce back on this next question. Next one that we have on our list is this one that asks, a technician is working with an ISO file. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this file? Would it be data backups, cloud storage, file encryption, email migration, or application installation? A technician is working with an ISO file. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this file? Is it data backups, cloud storage, file encryption, email migration, or application installation? I think I could go a couple ways on this one. We're going to have to talk this one out. If you think you know the answer, Here's your link. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We're going to see if we know what we think this one might be. See if you are familiar with an ISO file. An ISO. Some people say it's an ISO file, and there's no judgment here. Either one works with me. An ISO file is, well, I'm not going to say anything about the ISO file. I don't want to give you any hints. I don't want to give you any direction. I will tell you it's one of these 5 options. That's the best I could tell you. It's not really a hint, is it? It's a non-hint. That's all I have for you are non-hints. So hopefully you can kind of step through the idea of when you would use this, how you would use this, what this would be used for. Some of you may already be familiar with these. Now you just have to apply your knowledge of what that is towards when you would use this, which, by the way, is a very common thing with this exam. They aren't interested in knowing what this is. In fact, you're not going to get a question on the exam that says, what does the abbreviation ISO stand for? You will never get that. That is never going to show up on your exam. They never ask those. Instead, they ask questions like this, which make you think, when would you use this technology? How would this technology be implemented on your network? Let's see how you would implement it. The question again asks, a technician is working with an ISO file. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this file? Would it be data backups, cloud storage, file encryption, email migration, or application installation? Let's see what you chose. And we have on our list 60% of you that say that would be an application installation. 25% of you say the answer is data backups. So we're sort of torn, although clearly we have a strong majority at 60%. 8% of you say file encryption, 3% say cloud storage, and almost a percent, we'll give it the 0.01 extra, say email migration. Well, let's talk about ISO or ISO files, depending on how you would like to talk about them. These are files that end in an ISO extension, like this one here, which is windows.iso. These are optical disc images. This ISO is really standing for the standards organization that created this. Specifically, it's an ISO 9660 file system. Kind of a bad description of the file format, quite honestly, but it's the one that we often will associate with ISO files. It's the only type we really see associated with ISO files. And this is one that is effectively taking an existing drive or storage device, and it's creating from that storage device this single file that represents everything that is included on that particular device. It's a very common way to send information out over optical drives, for example. You often can download an ISO file from the internet, and when you mount that ISO file, you can even see in Windows, you have the option at the very top to mount the ISO file. It turns the ISO file into the file system that it came from. So you effectively have this single file, and then when you mount it, it becomes an entire file system unto itself. And you're able to see all of the different files. And here's an example now that we've mounted this file, this ISO file. Look, it's got all these folders inside. It's got configuration files. It's Windows. They took an entire Windows installation drive, installation files, everything that would be there, and rolled it up into one single file, which is often a lot easier to be able to work through. So that is one that can really help you quite a bit if you're working through this challenge of being able to take a big bunch of folders and documents, and you want to somehow get them in the hands of someone else, but keep everything in that format and make sure they don't forget anything. An ISO file is a great way to distribute that information. This is what we would use in many different formats. So those of you that said email migration probably would not put all my emails in an ISO file. Very, very unusual to use an ISO file during an email migration or any other type of data migration. Cloud storage. Well, cloud storage doesn't need any particular kind of format, and ISO files are not commonly associated with cloud storage. You probably are using Google Drive or Dropbox. You probably don't have any ISO files in there, do you? So, or maybe you do, but it's probably not everything that's in there, and it's certainly not required to have something in your cloud storage. Would not be file encryption. An ISO file could be encrypted. You could encrypt the data that is on that file. You could encrypt the ISO file itself, but that's not what you would normally use an ISO file for. That's just a secondary thing you can add to the data that you're storing in that ISO file. And in fact, many ISO files are not encrypted at all. So something that is not very common for ISO files. I would not choose file encryption as the most likely use of this file. Now, data backups is an interesting one. We don't often back up data and store it in an ISO format. Backups are usually stored in their native format. We're simply copying a file from one drive and copying that file somewhere else. A good example was the cloud storage piece of it. The other part of data backups is they're often stored in a proprietary format. Maybe you're using third-party backups, and it has its own way of storing that data, but it's not often and hardly ever stored as an ISO file. That just makes it a little more difficult to gain access to that data afterwards. It'd be more like an archive of an installation DVD, for example, or a set of installation files, but not data backups. It almost puts another barrier in the way of retrieving that data if you do need to restore from those backups. So although 25% of you chose data backups, probably not the most likely use given the other options. And the last option we didn't talk about, and the answer that is the correct one, is what 60% of you chose, which is application installation. Because now, if you ever install an application from scratch, you'll see tons of folders. There's a bunch of files associated with that. Well, a good example is this is the installation folder, installation ISO for Windows. And this Windows install has a boot directory, an EFI directory, a sources directory, a support directory, separate INF files. There's a bunch of other things on here. Well, how do I distribute that to somebody, but make sure we tell them? Can you imagine distributing these individually? All right, download the boot folder. Okay, good. Now download the EFI folder. You got that one? Put it in the same folder as the other one. Now download the sources folder. You got everything that was in there? Okay, put that also in this. This is almost ridiculous in trying to get someone to install it properly. Instead, we distribute it as a single ISO, and now we know that everything is distributed in the way that it's supposed to be. All the files are located where they're supposed to be located. When we mount that, it becomes its own file system, and we're able to install perfectly without that. Application installation, given the different options here, is the one that is the most likely use of this file. That is what you would use, and that is the most common use of an ISO file, although some of these could be used. In fact, I would say all of these could be used for data backups or cloud storage or file encryption or email migration. They aren't commonly. And that's why in this question, it asks the most likely use. And given all of your options, the most likely use is application installation. This is, by the way, a very common way to ask questions on the exam. They want you to know what's the best answer, what's the most likely answer, which is the thing you would do first. Those are things you need to focus on for this exam. So hopefully that is something you can keep in mind. If you answered application installation, 60% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, as you probably have noticed already, with all of this, only a few Q&A, the few questions that we've done, the answers that we've gone through, the content that we've stepped through already, there's a lot of information in the A+ exam. If you go through all of my videos, it's 137 videos, over 19 hours of content. So there's a lot there to pour through. Now, I would recommend you go through all 137 videos, but of course, I'm the one that made the videos. So of course I would say that. There may be some of these that you sort of know that topic, and maybe you can skip over them, or maybe you're short of time and you just don't have time to go through all 137 videos. Well, in that particular case, you might want to get an extra set of notes, something that can help walk you through this information from the exam. I've already made those. This is a set of my course notes for the 220-1102. This is distributed both as a PDF and as a physical printed document. You'll notice that it's identical in its printed form as the digital form, so you can get the version that works best for you. But as you step through it, all of the text from my videos, all of the charts, all the graphics, the command lines. So if you are going through the shutdown command, the SFC/scan now command, those should look familiar to us already. They are listed in the set of course notes, and they are summarized by my videos. So you can go video by video and follow along with the information that is contained within the course notes. And After the video is over, you now have everything that was covered during that video. They're not intended to replace the videos. They're not intended to replace your hands-on or your Q&A, but it does give you another way to take this information in a very concise and consolidated form wherever you happen to be, either in the digital PDF format that you see on the screen or the physical format. I will be able to send it to you as a printed and bound paperback book printed in full color. So everything here can provide you with that. And if you get the physical version, I give you the digital version for free. So while you're waiting on this to be shipped to you, you'll be able to download the digital version immediately and start working on all of that. Those are my course notes. You can find out more about those on my website. Simply visit professormesser.com/1102 notes. Let's do some more questions, shall we? Next on our list is this multiple choice question that asks, a system administrator is troubleshooting an issue with Windows and SSO. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this issue? Would it be Kerberos, WPA3, SSL, Radius, or SNMP? So a few to choose from. The question again asks, a system administrator is troubleshooting an issue with Windows and SSO. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this issue? Is this Kerberos, WPA3, SSL, Radius, or SNMP? You think you know the answer? Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in what you think the answer is. I'm seeing the numbers go up immediately, like they're plugging it in. This might be a gimme. We'll have to see how well we do on this one and see if we can move that number up a little bit and figure out the details of it. Hopefully, this is one you are familiar with. Got to figure out, there's a lot of abbreviations in this one. Again, same problem, same issue. Let's see if we can sift through all of these different abbreviations and acronyms and figure out what the right answer is going to be for this one. It should be pretty good. If we are working through and trying to understand how to troubleshoot problems, we need to understand where the root cause of this problem could possibly be. This hopefully is a question that will lead you down the road of where that root cause might be. So we've cranked up these numbers very, very quickly, which hopefully means that I have given you some good insight in my videos as to where problems might be associated with these technologies or what these different technologies are. Hopefully that can give you some perspective of what you might want to choose. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a system administrator is troubleshooting an issue with Windows and SSO. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this issue? Would this be Kerberos, WPA3, SSL, Radius, or SNMP? What did you choose? 47% of us, not quite a majority, said Kerberos is the issue. We have 21% that say the answer is Radius. 20% say the answer is SSL. So it's these three different options we're kind of torn between, although Kerberos certainly got the bulk of the answers on this one. 7% of you said SNMP, and then 4% said WPA3. So the real question here, and the one we are trying to figure out, is the abbreviation in the question itself. A system administrator is troubleshooting an issue with Windows and SSO. SSO, of course, is a single sign-on. That's what that abbreviation is for. And it describes us logging into a system one time and then having access to all of the resources that should normally be available to us without having to log in every time we hit yet another resource. So, for example, when you log in the morning, there are these shares that you might connect to. Well, there's an authentication that needs to take place. So maybe that first authentication, we put in our username and password. Then later on, we pull up some documents. Now we need to print the documents. We simply send them to the network printer. But we didn't have to put in a username and password. It just remembered somehow what our original authentication happened to be. And then later on, maybe we need to connect to a different set of shares. Maybe we also need to upload something to the intranet. Maybe we need to access a new server that we've not accessed before. And all of that works seamlessly with single sign-on without you having to type in your username and password every time you connect to those devices. Really valuable to be able to do something like that. So this is, of course, what we want to focus on. So we want to be able to understand which of these technologies then are associated with single sign-on. Kerberos, WPA3, SSL, Radius, or SNMP. 47% of us chose Kerberos, and you would indeed be absolutely correct. Kerberos is a very common way to have some type of format or at least some type of standard for single sign-on. It's very common for single sign-on, and this is the protocol that Windows uses to provide that single sign-on capability. It is a great way to authenticate once and not have to authenticate again, perhaps for the rest of the day. And there's a lot of additional functions built in. An interesting one is mutual authentication. So not only do you know you're logging into the legitimate server, the server knows that you are a legitimate user. There are different ways to do that. It's all cryptographically built into the Kerberos standard. This is a standard that's been around for a long time, since the 1980s. Way back in the 1980s, we had Kerberos. And we started using Kerberos in Windows with Windows 2000. Gosh, when did Windows 2000 come out? I got to think about that one. Maybe some of you know. And this is all based on Kerberos, sort of the Windows flavor of Kerberos, but a lot of it is very standardized. And it is a great way to provide that single sign-on functionality inside of the Windows operating system without Microsoft having to recreate the wheel. They're just going to use this open standard that was already created, that already works, that is already seamless, and they just integrate it right into their operating system. And it works like a charm. Well, that was the answer we were looking for. Kerberos, 47% of you chose that one as the correct answer, and that would be the answer we were looking for. But what about these other answers? Why are they not the most likely source of this issue if we're trying to troubleshoot SSO? Let's look at them. We have 21% that said Radius. Radius is yet another authentication protocol. Very common to use Radius or LDAP or TACAX Plus or Kerberos. Those are 4 very common authentication types that we use in our environments. This, by the way, is a great way to authenticate. It's a protocol that we've been using for a very long time for authentication, but Radius in and of itself doesn't provide any single sign-on functionality. So we might sign on with Radius credentials, and then if we ever have to access a different resource, we would have to put in our credentials again, because Radius has no way to remember that we've already logged in somewhere else and that we need access to our normal resources. So Radius would not be the answer we were looking for. SSL, which is a great way to encrypt your web communication using secure sockets layer. The modern version of this, of course, is TLS, the transport layer type of encryption. They're both effectively the same protocol. And although TLS is the more modern version of SSL, it's an upgraded version of SSL. It's the one that we use most commonly. In fact, it'd be very unusual to find somebody still using SSL. We still call it SSL. Well, although we're calling it SSL, we really mean TLS. It's one of those odd idiosyncrasies of the industry and how we use terms. But SSL, I think it's because SSL, it just rolls right out the tongue. SSL. Are you using SSL? Have you set up the SSL certificate? SSL. It's so much easier than TLS. Have you configured the TLS certificate? See why we use SSL? So the real key for those of you working on your next generation protocol, the real and perhaps the most important part of your next protocol that you build is that it's easy to tell people what the abbreviation of the protocol happens to be. Just one of those things to work on. And then we have others that we did not choose here, like SNMP, the Simple Network Management Protocol. SNMP, very commonly used by network professionals and administrators of systems to be able to remotely manage those devices and keep track of how they're performing. SNMP really has nothing to do with single sign-on, however. So would not be the Simple Network Management Protocol. And lastly, WPA3. This is a very common protocol on our wireless networks to be able to provide encryption of that wireless communication. That is, although very useful for encryption, has no functionality from a single sign-on perspective. So in this case, the only option, not just the one that would be the most likely source, but really the only source for this particular issue is Kerberos. 47% of you got that one absolutely correct. So for those of you that are watching this video, either in real time as we're doing this live, or you're watching it on the replay, I would love to be able to send you an email that certifies that you are here for 1 hour of this webinar category event. And the way you would do that is you follow these instructions. You have to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a link there that says Contact Us. Click that Contact Us link, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put August 2024 Core 2. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, Kerberos Radius SSL. SSL. Kerberos Radius SSL. Those are the super secret code words of the month. You can also put anything else in there you would like, but please put all of those on the same line so that I can find them very easily when I'm going through these manually and confirming them and sending you back the email. It usually takes me about a week to turn these around and get them back to you, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but I eventually do get them back to you. So for those of you wanting to do this, let's go through those instructions one more time. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. Click Contact Us. In that Contact Us box, in the form that comes up, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put August 2024 Core 2. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month. Let's see if I can remember. Kerberos, was it Kerberos Radius SSL? I think it was. If you get close to that, I think we're in pretty good shape. I'll know that you listened in and we're able to do that. Send that to me, and then I will be able to turn around an email. You'll receive an email with a digital signature attached to it so that you know it really came from me. You can even verify that it came from me by going through the process of verifying that digital signature. How do you verify that digital signature? I will leave that to you as a task that you need to figure out on your own. I'll give you hints if you want it, but I think most of you will be able to figure that piece out. We do have a little bit of time before the top of the hour, so I would love to do at least a couple more questions. Let's fit a couple more in. Next on our list is this one. This question asks, which of the following would be the best way to view detailed memory usage statistics on an iPhone? Would it be jailbreaking, developer mode, time machine, mission control, or iCloud? The question again asks, which of the following would be the best way to view detailed memory usage statistics on an iPhone? Would this be jailbreaking, developer mode, time machine, mission control, or iCloud? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you know what this one happens to be. Maybe you do. Maybe you're already familiar with the technology you would use for this. Yes, I'm so sorry, you Android users that are in the chat, but the rest of us out here that need to do work, we're using iPhones. So you need to, this is me intentionally trolling my viewers. Probably not a great idea. I use all of them, by the way. I use Android, I use iOS, I use Windows, I use Linux, I use Mac OS. So we can all complain equally about how bad they all are. How about that? So it's hard for me to choose a side there. What if they're all bad? That's the answer. So hopefully you are familiar with some of these answers. Yes, I did not mean to come off quite so harsh. That was just awful to be able to say that. I often tell people the Androids, they don't reboot in the middle of a phone call anymore. You can use them now. They work fine. So that's me. Another. What happened? Here's what's going to happen. That's sort of the way it works. What fun are you going to have in this industry if you don't poke fun at operating systems from time to time? I think it's probably one of the most popular secondary things that we do in this industry is we all fight amongst each other on, no, this one's better. No, that one's better. And of course we're all wrong. So there is some consistency in what we do there, is that we are all wrong, including myself, with which one is the best, because they're all good in certain ways, depending on what you do with them. So we'll have to figure it out. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which of the following would be the best way to view detailed memory usage statistics on an iPhone? Would it be jailbreaking, developer mode, time machine, mission control, or iCloud? Let's hit the close poll and see what we get. We got 42% of us that say developer mode. We have 24% that say iCloud. We have 21% that say mission control. We have 10% that say time machine, and we say 1% say jailbreaking. And by the way, there's a reason we no longer have a Windows operating system on a mobile device. So I think there's some things we can all agree on, right? We can all come together on that one. In this case, however, the thing that we would like to be able to do, because iPhone, they don't give you a lot of detail on information that's on your screen. You need something else to give you detailed information about what's happening on these iPhones. One of the best ways to do that is through developer mode. Developer mode puts your iPhone into a mode that will send additional information either out the USB connection. You can often plug in your USB or Lightning connection to the device and bring up a console, and you can effectively see in real time what that phone happens to be doing. So if you're trying to troubleshoot a problem, you might be able to find error messages. You might be able to provide those logs to your support team. There's a lot of great information in the developer mode. And if you want to be able to at least get some feel of what's there, you will need a Mac with running Mac OS. Obviously, it's an iPhone. So everything you do on the iPhone, you need Mac OS. And you need to run the developer front end for these systems, which is known in that world as Xcode. Xcode is there. And obviously, the Mac OS has to be there. Now, if you're running Android, guess what? There's ways to do it in Android. Android's perfectly capable. You go to the settings about phone, and you tap, literally, this is the way you do it. You tap the build number 7 times. Puts it in developer mode. I am not making this up. Sounds like I'm making it up. I'm not making it up. What if I was making it up and everybody's now on their phone tapping it 7 times and it didn't work, and they tapped it another 7? No, it really does work. I had to try it myself just to make sure that what I was reading was correct and that I was putting into my videos, because I didn't want to put this in and have somebody go, what are you talking about with the 7 tappings? No, it's the same thing when you reboot Windows 3. You interrupt the Windows reboot 3 times in Windows 10 and Windows 11 so that you can get to the recovery prompt. People are like, really? You have to stop the booting process. You have to interrupt it 3 times. Yes, that's actually what you do. That's documented. It's part of the operating system. It's on the Microsoft website. I was not making it up. It really does work. And in this case, this one really does work. Developer mode, you could find all kinds of crazy things. If you're ever wondering what could make me feel not smart today, simply turn on developer mode and look at the log files in your operating system, and you will feel not smart, because there's so much very detailed information going by the screen, but you sometimes can pick out these little pieces, these little nuggets of information in that developer mode that at least give you pause, that at least say, this says error or critical error, or this is a bad error and it's all in red and it's all uppercase. Do you think this is a problem? So you can really find some interesting things, even if you don't understand the language that's passing by on the screen. You don't understand every line of every log file that's there. Indeed, that's kind of normal. If you go out to I was on the Apple forums recently trying to troubleshoot a problem with my log files. And if you've ever looked at log files on a Mac OS system, it is just a constant barrage of information that is scrolling on the screen. It's almost difficult to stop what's going by to see what's really happening. And they talk about this. The developers themselves talk about this, that's just the way it is. And most of this stuff's worthless. It looks like it's an error. It looks like it's something important. That's not really. That's just sort of the way the operating system works. And so I think it's sort of the way most operating systems work. The developer mode's what we were looking for. That is the right answer. And 42% of you got that one absolutely correct. 24% of you said iCloud. iCloud's a fantastic resource to be able to store information, synchronize data, store documents, integrates with your phones quite nicely, but it doesn't provide any detailed memory usage information. It has no capability. It doesn't enhance your perspective of how well the iPhone might be running. So it would not be the answer we were looking for. Mission control is a function within Mac OS. It's not on the iPhone, at least not directly. So mission control is not the answer we were looking for. And mission control itself, even if it was on the iPhone, would not show detailed memory usage statistics. We also have 10% that's a time machine. Time Machine is a utility in Mac OS, not on the iPhone. And Time Machine is a backup utility. In fact, on my Mac machine, on my Mac OS device, which is right in front of me, It's all running Time Machine. It's backing up every hour. So I know where that information might be. I'm not going to lose anything. It's all where we would expect to find it if we need to go back in time and find previous versions of a file. But it has no way to provide detailed memory usage stats on an iPhone. Not what Time Machine is for. And then jailbreaking, which technically could possibly provide me with more detailed memory usage statistics on an iPhone, because you're effectively replacing the existing operating system with one that is made by a third party. In fact, it's kind of dangerous to be doing that, but it is something that a number of people will toy with and see how well they're going through the process of that. I say it's dangerous because you have no idea where that operating system came from. There's a level of trust that you want to have with the operating system that you are using. But because it's a third-party operating system, they may be able to show you different information. In fact, you can often get detailed information on an iPhone that has been jailbroken, but that's not the best way. And again, we go back to these questions on this exam. What's the best way? What's the first thing you should do? What is the most appropriate next step? Those are important things. So although jailbreaking could potentially, and indeed technically could be correct, in this particular case, it is not the best answer. The best answer here is indeed developer mode. 42% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Well, I know we're after the top of the hour, but I wanted to squeeze one more question in here, if you would not mind. This question is one that comes from a different document. It's my Core 2 A+ Practice Exams book. I don't have my Core 2 book here. I have my Core 1. Just pretend I'll cover up the 1. So it's my practice exams book, everybody. The Core 2 practice exams that I have in front of me. It's a big book, though. There's a lot in here. 3 separate practice exams, including performance-based questions, 380 pages, 90 questions in each exam. 5 of those questions are performance-based questions. 85 of them are multiple choice. And these are questions, the reason I made this book is that I wasn't happy with the questions I was seeing in other places, either online or in other questions you would purchase. I wanted you to have access to questions that were written in a similar style, in a similar tone as the actual exam questions. And I wanted to provide you with questions that could really help you learn the topics, which I think a lot of other resources fall a bit short. So I wanted to show you my practice exams and see if this kind of gives you a perspective of what you could do. So we're going to do a practice exam that I have right here. This is practice exam A49 from my practice exam book. What page is this on? It's right after page 17. This is page 18 of my Core 2 practice exams book. The question, again, no answers in the chat room. The question says, a technician has been called to resolve an issue with a networked laser printer that is not printing. When the technician arrives on site, they find the printer will require a hardware replacement. All hardware is managed by a third party. It will take a week before the printer is operational again. Which of the following would be the technician's best next step? Would that be A, work on the next ticket in the queue, B, add a follow-up event for 1 week later, C, inform the user of the repair status, or D, order a printer maintenance kit? So you've got a few options there. Now, you could scroll down to page 33 to look at a quick answer, which would just tell you it's A, B, C, or D. Or you can go to page 85 to look at the details of this answer. Now, this is a PDF, so if you have a way to annotate parts of the PDF, or you would like to, maybe you're using this on a tablet and you have a stylus, you can write on the screen. It's absolutely available to do that if your PDF reader supports that for you. This also is useful because I created these links for the answers. I mentioned that we were on page 18. So 5 without scroll. Well, it's a click. It's right there. So if you hit the details, it takes you to page 85 where a separate question, the separate copy of the question is there. And it tells you the answer is C, inform the user of the repair status. And it gives you an answer of why that is the right answer. Now, if you were looking at other sources for questions, you're done with that. But my problem, and perhaps the challenge you run into when you're taking these tests online, is you often will get a question wrong. And the natural next question from you will be, well, why did I get that wrong? So in my book, every single practice question has an explanation of not only why the right answer is right, but I tell you why the wrong answers are wrong. I think this is an important part of the learning process because when you get something wrong, it's an opportunity. It's a chance to learn more about that technology, to close the loop a little bit so that you can really understand why the answer was either right or why your answer was wrong. And then you'll be ready the next time you see these topics. I will also tell you, as if you get the answer right, don't just skip over the wrong answers. Working on the next ticket in the queue, adding a follow-up event, ordering a printer maintenance kit. These are important topics that come directly from the exam objectives. So although this question had nothing to do with ordering a printer maintenance kit, because that was one of the wrong answers, you might get a question on your exam that has to do with printer maintenance kits. So again, this is a chance to kind of feed a little bit of information into your brain, kind of get those synapses firing with these particular topics, so that even though this question did not have that as a topic, it has now prepared you a little bit better if that topic happens to appear on your exam. And once we're done with this, we've now gone through, and maybe you didn't even understand the question. That's okay. I have a link to the video that I used to create this question to begin with, so that you can either agree or disagree, but you'll know exactly where this topic came from and how you can learn more about that topic if you need to. And if this is you're watching this on or reading this on a real book, the QR code is built into the book. You can see the QR codes going by there. Or if this is on your screen, you can simply click those links. Those links are also dynamic links that will take you there. And once you're done with this question, I'm gonna hit the rewind question. If I didn't lock my screen here, I want to click the back button in my PDF reader, click that back button up here, click, and now I'm back to where I started. And we can simply go to the next question that's on our list. Those are my practice exams. I have practice exams book for the Core 1. I have practice exams book for the Core 2. If you buy them together or you buy them with course notes, you get a little bit of a discount. So there might be a benefit to doing that. You can find out more on our website or follow the direct link at professormesser.com/core2pe. Hopefully it's a set of practice exams that's going to help you. It's also a great way to support what we do here at professormesser.com. Well, that takes us kind of to the end of the hour, but don't worry, we got more questions coming up. Stick around for the questions that you submit. You can submit those questions at any time from the tab at the top of your screen by visiting that link, professormesser.com/QA. I mentioned that all of the questions and topics we went through today came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have a copy of these, you need to download these and use them. They are free. They're on the CompTIA website. You can either follow the link on my site, which is professormesser.com/objectives, or simply type into your favorite search engine, CompTIA exam objectives. They'll take you right to the page. Download those. They are a great list to tell you what's on the exam. It's also a great way to prepare when you're ready to go into the exam. So for example, I've got a list of these objectives up right here, and it tells you a bulleted breakdown of exactly what is expected in every single part of this exam. So this is a fantastic way to answer that age-old question, am I ready to go take this exam? Well, I don't know. Did you go through the checklist, which is the exam objectives? It's a great way to test yourself. And if you're ever trying to determine, am I ready, am I not ready, this might be the document for you. You can find that over on the CompTIA website, or simply visit professormesser.com/objectives and use the link to go over to the CompTIA site. We do one of these study groups every month. We have A+ study groups already scheduled for September. We also have Network Plus and Security Plus study groups later on in August. If you're trying to figure out when the next live event is going to be, you can always visit our calendar. We have it at professormesser.com/calendar. We also have a very interesting version of this in the events side on our Discord, and they're identical. So if I'm ever needing to update one of these dates or change any of these times, I change them on this calendar and I change them in our Discord. So whether you're looking at the events channel in Discord or whether you're looking at the calendar on the website, both of these should be synchronized and up to date. You'll be able to find exactly what you are looking for. Well, the part where I ask you the questions is sort of over at this point, but we have questions that you are going to ask of me in our second hour. We call this our after show. It'd be great if you stick around for that one. Don't forget about our course notes and practice exams on our website. You can visit professormesser.com/1102success, or our discounted vouchers. Why pay full price for a voucher when I've already got them discounted on my site? And you get my exam hacks book for free. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers. And don't forget, on social media, you simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find me on, /Discord, /Twitter, /LinkedIn, /Facebook, /YouTube. We're everywhere, or almost everywhere. So that's a great way to find us if you happen to be on those platforms. We like to be where you are. So if there's one that I'm not, let me know. We'll have to join up on that one as well. This is also a great way to get the daily pop quiz question over on Twitter, or the organization that is formerly known as Twitter, on Facebook or on LinkedIn. They're all posted there as well. Well, although we've come to the end of that first hour, as I mentioned, we got more questions coming up in a moment. Stick around for the after show. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Okay, let's take a sip. Let's bring up cameras. There we go. Let's put that away. And let's get ready for the second hour. The way that you would do that is visit the link that is on your screen. There will be questions waiting for you. And if you notice on your screen, if you visit that link, it will even tell you right now that you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We'll be moderating back here behind the scenes, so you won't see them pop up on your screen immediately, but they will be submitted. I will be able to sift through them. So if you have questions about the A+ exams, about IT in general, about technology, or really about anything, I mean, you can ask anything. I don't know that I'll answer anything, but I'll certainly try to. Yeah, put those questions into the list. Simply visit professormesser.com/QA to submit those questions. There are already a number of questions that have popped up into this list. So I think it might be useful to step through a number of these and just start pouring through what might be there. When you submit these, you have the option to submit them with your name associated with them, or in this particular case, you can submit them as someone who is anonymous. The anonymous person asks this question: would you say the Core 2 is easier than the Core 1? Would I say that? I don't know. I have maintained, and I still think this is probably true, that the difficulty level of both exams is pretty comparable. They're almost identical in their difficulty level. Now, obviously, the topics are very different between all of these. The topics are different on the Core 1 than the Core 2. I think I have a list of these. One moment, please. While we bring up that list, while we go off mic just a little bit and have you wonder if maybe you need to adjust your speaker. You do not. That's just me going off mic. But I have, here's the list. We went through this earlier. So Core 1 contains mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and then troubleshooting all that. And then the Core 2 has operating systems, security, and software troubleshooting, along with operational procedures. So many people refer to these two exams. It used to be named this way. It's not quite this way anymore, but they often refer to Core 1 as the hardware exam, and they often refer to Core 2 as the operating system exam. But as you can see, that's not exactly true, but that's partially true. So we'll kind of give you credit for that. So they're very different content between the two exams, but I think both of them are effectively the same difficulty level. Now, the difference, though, is you. That's where the difficulty level changes. Let's say, for example, that you are a hobbyist, you've built your own computers, you've built your own gaming systems, you've installed your own CPU with your own CPU cooler. Maybe you put in and upgraded to a liquid-cooled system versus the fans that you were using, and you had to replace some fans, and you changed out the RAM. Maybe you've already done all of this. You've already built your own system. The topics that are in the Core 1 will be very familiar to you. The type of cables, the type of connectors, the CPU, the motherboard, those things are second nature to you. You're very familiar with those topics. But maybe you're not a strong Windows user. Maybe you've never got into the details of the control panel. Maybe you've never dived into Linux, or you haven't worked a lot with Mac OS. Well, then maybe the Core 2 might seem a little more difficult to you. So that's a good example of where, although I think the two exams are similar in structure and tone and difficulty, obviously your experiences may be a little bit different. Some people, and I see that the arguments happen all the time. People will say, oh, I'm so glad I got to Core 2. I've been using Windows forever. This is like second nature to me. So much easier than Core 1. Other people will say, I've been building my laptops and machines and working inside of these devices forever. I'm so comfortable with the topics on Core 1. Core 2 is very difficult for me. So I really do believe it's specific to you, that this really is how you feel and how your experiences have been with these topics that determine whether one is easier or not than the other. A lot of this also is maybe there seems to be more rote memorization on the Core 1. So a lot of people don't like that. They prefer the Core 2 because of that. Other people love the memorization, so they feel Core 1 was a little more comfortable. At least they knew what they were getting into on the Core 1 side, and they're very... they find that the troubleshooting, what is the best thing, the first option, what is the most typical, what would you expect? Those are more difficult problems to go through. So I can appreciate that. And I think that's probably an accurate perspective of what many people might go through with that particular question. So would I say the Core 2 is easier than the Core 1? For some people, yes. For other people, I would say the Core 1 is easier than the Core 2. So that's effectively a non-answer from Professor Messer. I'm so glad that I was able to help you with that particular question. I am so sorry, but that is the feedback I get from you. So I'm sort of repeating what you've told me from that perspective anyway. Let's do some more questions and kind of step through more things that you have on this list. Here is a frequently asked question. This is from Ethan, who asks, do you get partial points on performance-based questions / multiple choice if you get some of it right and some of it wrong? If you're on the right track, if you're partial, you get some of it right. Shouldn't you get some of the points? Well, this is a question that has been debated over time. Fortunately, CompTIA has provided us with some feedback that can give us some clarity on this particular question. I'm going to search for CompTIA PBQ FAQ. They have a frequently asked questions file document page for performance-based questions. And if you scroll down in their list of questions, the last question asks, should be the first question. The last question asks, is partial credit given if I answer part of a performance-based question correctly? Oh, finally, we can get a definitive answer. CompTIA tells us there may be questions for which partial credit is offered. However, exam questions and their scoring are confidential, so no further information can be provided regarding which questions may offer partial credit. So the answer from CompTIA is a qualified maybe. That doesn't help us at all, really. That tells us nothing. It tells us, we could, might, sure, could do that. Sometimes we do that. Certainly a possibility for you. We might not. We could not. Maybe on that one we don't. Maybe in this particular case, we don't do that. Now, the challenge with this, of course, is that you'll never know whether you got partial credit or not. They don't break down the scoring on your final report. All you know is your final score. You have no idea how that score was calculated. There's no feedback about how the score was calculated. They will never tell you how the score was calculated. We will never know how that score was calculated. And so what I really recommend to folks who would like to know about how does the grading work and how does the scoring work and do you get partial credit and how many questions do you need and should you spend more time on performance-based than multiple choice? Should you spend time on more time on multiple choice than performance-based? The answer is we don't know. We don't know. It could be the performance-based questions count almost nothing towards the final score, or it could be the performance-based questions are worth a significant number of points. We simply don't know, and there's no way to ever tell. So this is another one of those where we can all sit around and debate whether it's done one way or the other, but in this particular case, there's no way to know. My recommendation to you is not to worry about it. My recommendation to you is to focus on the exam objectives, understand all of the objectives, understand what is expected of you on this exam with the multiple choice and performance-based questions, and then it doesn't matter how they ask the questions of you. You will be able to answer them. So focus on the content, focus on the objectives, and then it never matters. So that's what I would recommend to you as well. Do not worry about other details of this particular exam or how it's graded or any of the other aspects of numbers associated with this exam, because ultimately we have no way to confirm or deny anything about the scoring process. So they weren't wrong when they gave us the feedback that said, maybe not. That's as good as we're going to get. So although it's interesting to talk about, interesting to think about, interesting to hope that we get, please, can we get partial credit? Ultimately, we have no idea whether we were given partial credit or not, nor will we ever know, at least not in the reasonable future. Maybe someday they'll tell us for sure. Wouldn't it be great if we got a big output of the scoring that told us exactly the number of points we got? Maybe someday. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. Don't count on it. Not going to go through there. Let's do another question on our list. Thank you, Ethan, for that question. Let's go to more questions on this list. We've got others that we can sift through. If you wanted to submit a question, you follow the link on your screen. It's the one that's right here, professormesser.com/QA. There it is. Go to that link and you'll be able to submit a question that I will be able to see on this side and then be able to either show you or not show you, depending on how we do with this. Let's step through these other pieces. This is a pretty good question. It kind of applies to other things. This is not from Anonymous. This is a question from John Doe, who is not anonymous. His name clearly is John Doe. John Doe says, sort of a question, kind of a fragment of a question, but we'll go with it. Best way to learn and remember all ports and protocols? What would be the best way to learn and remember all ports and protocols? This is actually a pretty good question, because if you look at the Core 1 exam, there's a lot of ports and protocols on that exam. There's plenty. There's a huge table of ports and protocols in my course notes. And so this is one of those few times on the exam, and there's a decreasing number of these, by the way. It's one of those things on the exam where they really do expect you to memorize these. You need to know the numbers and the ports and the protocols. We need to know it. But perhaps more importantly, we need to know what they are used for. We've done a few of them today. For example, I had a question where SMTP was part of the answer, and we were talking about mail. And so SMTP, you need to know that's the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. It's useful if you understand the ports associated with any of these protocols. But I would not recommend just doing a flashcard that has like HTTP on one side, port 80 on the other side, HTTPS on one side, 443 on the other side. That doesn't help you much for the actual exam. You need to add one additional piece of information to the flashcard. You might want to have port 80, and then when you flip the card around, it says HTTP, but then it explains what that is. It is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and here's where you would see that protocol in use. Here's where it would be used with the technologies that we are using today. So don't just memorize ports and protocols, numbers and protocols. That's not what you should be doing. You should instead be looking at when you would use that port and protocol. How would you implement that port and protocol? So simply memorizing the terms or the names doesn't necessarily help you through your exam. So I will at least give you that level of feedback that it might be more useful to you to memorize a larger context around the ports, protocols, and other things that we need to know, the different wireless standards, for example. I think as we've seen these exams evolve through the years, we're seeing less and less emphasis on rote memorization and much more of an emphasis on understanding the technologies behind it. And so I would highly recommend that you don't spend a lot of time just memorizing SMTP 25, HTTP 80. And doing simply back and forth over these, or just memorizing the names, which, by the way, we never use in normal conversation. We can never talk in real words in our industry. We always have to use the acronym. Sometimes knowing the acronym can help you understand a little bit about the technology. Sometimes it doesn't help at all. So it just depends. I mean, server message block. What? Huh? Is there even a server involved? Sorta, not really, kinda. Message block. Is that a instant message? Is it a text message? Is it an email message? It's none of them. So that's one of those examples where memorizing that SMB is server message block doesn't help you very much. You really need to know what that is. When would you see that? How would you use that? In what situations would you ever find this? So focus from that perspective, and I think you do much better with the memorization part of this and trying to remember those. And I guess the quick answer to the question, though, is use flashcards. That's really the quick answer to all of this. Let's do some more questions. We have time. We have a little bit of time here to step through a number of these. So let's go through this list. This is very forward looking, but we will take the question from Joey. Joey Image has this question. He says, my Core 2 exam is 1 week from tomorrow, August 16th. So it's coming up soon. So this is great. We were able to fit one of these live streams in. Joey writes, thanks for all you do. Question, once the current certification, I'm going to change your words here and say retires in late 2025, because that's when the current flavor of this exam that we're taking now, they're going to update the exam. You'll get a different set of questions at the end of 2025. How soon after they change those questions out do you update the study groups for the newer additions to that newer version of the exams? It usually is about 3 months or so after the exam is released do we sort of convert the study groups over. That's because even though there might be a new version of the A+ exam released, on that release day of that new version of the exam, there's not a lot of study materials available relative to the older version. And the older version's still good for another 6 months before it retires. So they're probably going to introduce new A+ exams like in March, April timeframe, right? That's about 9 months before the end of the year. So if that happens, there will be people, I mean, you could technically take the newer exam in March, but what you're going to find is there's not a lot of books available. People haven't made videos. There's not a lot of content relative to everything that's been out for 3 years for the other exam version. And you've got 6 months. So there's still plenty of time to take and pass the current versions of the exam. By the way, it doesn't matter which exam you take. Once you pass both exams, you're A+ certified. If they update the exams, you take both exams, you're still A+ certified. It's the same certification. There is no newer or older certification. There's only newer or older version of the exam questions. That's it. So that's why I think you should focus on taking whatever the most appropriate version of the exam is for the study materials you happen to have access to. So generally what we've done in the past is about 3 months after an exam is released, the industry sort of they catch up with themselves. They introduce some books. There's more videos available. There's more Q&A available. These things take time to create. We have to write the books. We have to make the videos. We have to edit and post the videos. There's things that have to be done. So there's work that goes on behind the scenes to make that happen. You just have to give it time for that to catch up to itself. And eventually, you'll start to see a mass of people sort of move from the older versions sort of into the newer version. And of course, at that point, we will have 3 years of study groups available for the older version. And that's a perfect time to flip over to the new version. So it doesn't take much time at all once those newer exams come out. We tend to have those study groups match what people tend to be studying for. It wouldn't make much sense to come out and do a study group for the new version on day one because almost nobody's studying that version at that point. So it's sort of a no-brainer from that perspective. Other questions. This is more of a personal behind-the-scenes question, more of an inside baseball from Lorcan, who asks, how and when did you know that IT was the career path you wanted to do? I'm still not sure. I'm kind of on the fence. That's not true. It's one of those things. I think it's probably built into the DNA of many of us that technology is something that we sort of gravitate to. Growing up, technology was, at least in the world of personal computing, I'm an old guy, so it was sort of in the infancy. People did not have computers at home. People did not have mobile. There was mobile telephones, but it was literally a telephone that was in a mobile device in your car. Like it was probably even bigger than a normal phone at that point. And so there was this advent of technology and IT and computers in general that blew up when the folks at Apple made that very first Apple computer, when HP started working on their printers, when you had these large companies like IBM suddenly creating a piece of hardware that was, albeit still expensive, it was inexpensive enough that you could purchase one for your home. Well, then things started to change very rapidly. We suddenly realized there's something interesting in this technology that we can really appreciate, that we can get into. We wanted to know, how did it work? That was my big thing, is that this is a solid state piece of equipment. How does that work? You know, we come from a world of mechanical devices, and suddenly the world changes into these solid state computing devices. How does that work? And of course, since these were emerging technologies, these were new systems, we needed people to learn the new systems. How do you take care of them? How do you load up the operating system? How do you get these applications working properly? How do you get that spreadsheet file to load the way it should? How do you fix it when there's a problem? How do you print from these devices? Those were all questions that we were faced with at the very beginning, and people that had a proclivity to this style of technology, to working with this device, this digital device of all solid state, that, by the way, didn't give you any lip. It didn't talk back to you. There was no interpersonal problems with this device. Sometimes working with that level of machinery has some advantages to it for certain folks. I could probably put myself in that category, being more comfortable working with a piece of machinery than working with a human. I think a lot of us are that way. I mean, outside of IT as well. I think a lot of people, we all struggle with communication. We all struggle with working with people. And I think that's one of the benefits here, is if you can kind of bridge the gap, if you can work with the technology, but at the same time, be the translator of that technology to other people, well, then I found that there was a real connection there. There was a real need for people that had that level of connection, because other people saw this as magic. They see it, and even still today, people see a computer and they go, I don't know. Don't ask me how it works. Like, well, I just need you to turn it off and turn it on again. I don't know. Does it turn off? Is there a button? I don't know. It's sort of a magical box to them. And they need people that can bridge the gap. Yep, there is a button. If you look on the top, there's a little silver button. Hold that down for 10 seconds for me. Tell me what happens. You know, you can talk people through the process of working with these, of what to click on, of how it works, of what's important. And then you could start building it out. Once you understand how it operates, now you can understand how to better deploy it, how to design it, how to create large networks of them, how to secure those networks. You know, it all builds on itself. And that's really the emphasis of our A+ course, our Network Plus course, our Security Plus course, is this building of technology. As you start building on it and you start gaining and accumulating this foundational knowledge of technology, you will start looking and thinking about it in different ways, in ways that you will be able to plan, deploy, secure, and just simply extend the knowledge that you've built into different parts of information technology. So I knew the second I saw a personal computer, oh, I want to know more about that. Now, at the time, I didn't understand what IT was. I didn't understand there was a career in this. I just thought it was cool. Like, what can we do with this? How can we can play games with this. We can create a spreadsheet. We can build out interesting things. I came from a very small town. There was a lot of agriculture in my particular county, and the folks at my county office, which are this state-sponsored, state-funded service for agriculture in the state of Florida. And we found ways to take this computing technology and build out spreadsheets that can help farmers understand what is the best crop that we could put in a particular location and what would be the expected yield of that crop. And is it better to do one or over a different one? And you could do what if analysis in your spreadsheet. Things that today we naturally pop open Google Sheets and we run through it. And we can even do that in our sleep. Back then, it was all a new thing that we could do. Like, we don't have to manually calculate it on a piece of graph paper. We can simply change the values on one cell and it repopulates these pages of information. So things that would take us weeks or months, assuming we even went through the steps ourselves to do it, now we had it in an automated fashion where we can make better decisions about almost anything. We just needed to find some way to get it into these technologies. That was one of, at that point in understanding technology, I didn't understand that it had that level of value. I thought it as a fun hobby. I thought it interesting in the way the technology worked, the hardware. Look, there's memory and there's a storage device, and it was all very interesting, but I didn't understand the scope. And at that point, when I started seeing them build these spreadsheets for farmers, which from where I grew up, that was a big deal. And that got me the impression that, wait, I could do this. We could really do interesting things with this. We could effectively change the world with this technology if implemented in the right way. And so I think that's probably the biggest piece for me. Now, the problem at the time was that there were no 4-year degrees in technology, at least not anything that was well thought out. We were at the very beginnings of this. To most everyone, technology was coding. It was understanding programming languages. It was understanding Pascal and COBOL. There was some C. There was a little bit of other scripting languages that you could work through. But nothing on this would really make sense for someone who was wanting a 4-year degree that specialized in information technology. Even today, it's hard to find a 4-year university that really does focus on the core information technology requirements. Even today, I've seen a number of 4-year degrees in IT that are still programming degrees. And I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but I don't understand why we don't do a better job with that in this country and around the world. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's a good reason to do what we do here and give people that impression that it is a machine that can do gaming. It is a machine where you can keep track of people. You can send your messages to people, but you can also do really amazing things with this technology that can change the way people live. And I think that us in technology, us in IT, is kind of a byproduct of that, because from my career that took me into the world of IT, that taught me about operating systems and networking and protocols and security, that showed me how IT itself is able to change people's lives. It's able to give people a job. It's able to give people a career, move up in that career. It pays very well. It gives us flexibility and control over our lives and our family. We can support the people that we care about. So that's one of the main reasons that we're doing this thing here with the camera and the live stream and the certifications. We often get wrapped up in what the port number is of SMTP and do we call it by its name or its protocol. Those are interesting arguments and conversations to have about what's better or worse. And that's all fun, and I think we should always do that. But we also have to think about the bigger picture, and that's an important part of what we do here, is give you that bigger picture. So I knew immediately I wanted to do more with that thing. I wasn't gonna go into real estate. I don't think finance was for me. I didn't think anything in the liberal arts worked for me. But this computer thing I could do. Now, how do you make a career on that? And it just sort of stumbled into that. Fortunately, the industry became huge and jobs were abundant and all kinds of crazy things ensued at that point. And here we sit. Here we are doing what we do here, and all for the better, I say. It's always fun. to be able to do that. And that is, I think, the emphasis I think many of us have in IT. And I think if you haven't kind of gotten into the scope of this, you will see it. You'll start that first job. It'll be for an insurance company or a training company or a transportation company or whatever it is, healthcare. These are jobs where, yes, there are computers involved and there's Microsoft operating system. We have to worry about doing that patch update. And what about our backups? All the normal things in technology we have to deal with. But we also have to keep in mind, because we're doing this, there's a hospital and it can make people better. Because we're doing this, there's a transportation company. The trains can run on time. The flights can fly on time. People can get from one part of the country or part of the world to another where they can do important things. That's what we think always about technology, is that the technology is interesting, but very often we're not doing this for technologies by itself. There's a bigger scope to this, almost always. And this is one of those very good examples of there is a bigger scope. Getting these certifications enables you. It gives you the option to get a job or get a better job. That's our mission statement. That's what we want you to do. That's it. That's our primary goal. It's all we work towards. I want you to get you a job or get you a better job. And from there, it's all upward mobility. It's all making it happen from that. So hopefully I haven't drone on too much about that, but that's philosophically how IT got into my blood and how it was probably there the whole time, and how I think it got bigger than I had ever thought it would ever be. And certainly that's true. More questions. Let's keep going through this list. This is from Mark. This is one you don't see very often from folks, but this is from Mark, who says, should I redo my A+ cert? I have already gotten my A+ in 2004. Mark, I have a feeling we are a kindred spirit here. And in 2004, it was GFL. Those are those fancy new lights that no, that's Good for Life. That's what that is. The Good for Life, back in the day. So before 2011, 2011's when this transitioned over, is back in the day, you would take and pass your A+ exams, and your A+ exam was good forever. You were certified forever. That was the way to do it, right? That's fantastic. You take these 2 exams, you pass it, you never have to renew your certification. That sounds great. Except back then, we were learning about, literally, on your A+, Windows NT. You were learning Windows 3.1. You were learning some of the older technology. Obviously, there is not a lot of Windows NT still being used. There's not a lot of Windows 3.1 that's still actively in use. Now, some of the things that we learned back then certainly still apply towards Windows, but you still have this challenge, of course, of keeping up with the latest technologies. And because of that, the international standards for certifications require that companies constantly update their training materials and provide a way for certified individuals to update their certifications. It's not something that CompTIA came up with. This is what the world standardization bodies came up with, so that if you wanted to be accredited with that particular type of worldwide industry standardization, you had to have a certification that could be renewed over time. And so that's why at 2011, CompTIA transitioned into a mode of certification where you needed to update and renew your certification every 3 years. Pretty reasonable, really. As long as you're paying attention to the renewals, this is something you should be able to do. And most recently, in the last number of years, CompTIA has introduced new ways to renew your certification where you could do it in about half a day. So very easy to sift through. That's the CertMaster CE, continuing education. That's their product that allows you to renew your certification relatively quickly. So that is sort of the history for those of you not familiar with that GFL or Good for Life timeframe. But the question Mark asked is, okay, I had the GFL, as did I. Had that certification back in the day, as did I. So the real question is, Should I redo that? Should I update it? Should I get the newest version of the A+? That if you were to look at your A+ certification, it's called the A+ CE. It's technically, that's the name of the cert now, so that you can differentiate it between the pre-2011 version, which was just the A+, and the new version that is based on the continuing education, which is A+ CE. But we just call it the A+. It's still all the A+ to us. The real question for Mark that I have for Mark is, do you need the A+? Some people like to have these certifications because they like to have it. That's perfectly reasonable. That's a good reason for having a certification. I'd like to earn that cert. I want that certification. I'm going to go out and get that cert. It's probably the minority of us, though. I think most people working on their A+, there's a bigger picture involved. There is a job that they would like to get, and that job either requires or would prefer that someone have their A+ certification. Or maybe they're in a position, they're in a current job, and to maintain that position or to move up in that company would like them to have their A+ certification. So there are reasons to have your A+. There is no employer today that would look at an A+ certification from 2004 and consider it valid and up to date. It's certainly not anyone who knows anything about the A+ anyway. So although you did go through the process in 2004, and those certifications, of course, are no longer available, that 2004 cert is no longer valid in any way, shape, or form, it's something you can't use. So you still would need to take the newer exams to earn that A+. So there's a cost and a time that you would sink into this to earn that. So really, this is about, what are you going to do with that? If you've been around this long in the industry, if you got your A+ in 2004, I'm kind of betting that you've probably either moved up in the ranks of IT into a position that probably doesn't need the A+, or maybe you're getting back into the industry and you would really like to show the content. Maybe you do need to get the A+. So it's very scenario driven. It's very specific to your circumstances. So figure out in your mind, is there value here? Is there value in knowing the content? There might be. We sometimes forget that when we go through this process of earning a certification that we actually learn something. Who would have thought that? But these are topics and things that we kind of keep in mind throughout the years. And that is exactly an important part of this. But this is also something where you might need it for a job. So that's a pretty self-contained, self-explanatory version of this. And you might also find that this certification is one that someone requires you to have. So this sort of goes back to Mark. Mark, the answer is, it depends. It depends on what you're going to do with it. The value for any certification, A+, Network Plus, a Cisco cert, a Microsoft cert, a Red Hat cert, any certification you get, AWS, the value of that certification is going to be based on what you do with it. So what are you going to do with it? If you're going to use that towards a job, it might totally be worth it. Yes, go get your newer A+. Or this just might be, well, I just want to put an A+ next to my name. I don't know if that's entirely necessary. But it might be something that you have a personal thing for doing. You want to earn that. For you, it's important. And that's a perfectly good reason as well. So that's what I would pose back to you. I would ask you, figure out in your world if that makes sense or not. The one you did in 2004, nobody's going to think is valid. It's not something you can use. It's part of your historic knowledge that's in your memory banks and in your foundational knowledge of IT, but it's really not worth much more than that in today's terms. So if you want an updated version of the A+ that is modern, that everybody knows, that everybody will respect and appreciate, then you probably do want to get the newer version of the A+. More questions. Let's keep going through this. This is a good one. If I can get to the right screen, there we go. Shaquita asks, how do you study for the PBQs, performance-based questions? This is another hot topic. This is another frequently asked question. And I'm going to first give you, we'll kind of talk about the performance-based questions, and then I'll give you what I think the ultimate answer is. So performance-based questions, as we mentioned earlier, are any question on the exam that is not multiple choice. So it's a question that is fill in the blank. Could be a matching question. It could be a drag and drop question. It could be a question where you have to put things in a particular order. Today we did one where you had to know 3 different command lines. On the actual exam, it would probably put you at a command prompt. You would have to type them in to do it. So there are different types of questions, but effectively a performance-based question is any question that is not multiple choice. Think of it that way. And you will get a handful of these questions at the beginning of your exam. The first number of questions will be performance-based questions. Don't be thrown by this, by the way. People have come back to me after their exams and they've said, what were those questions at the beginning? I spent most of my time trying to get through these because I thought the entire exam was like this. And then after 5 of them, it was all multiple choice the rest of the time. And I had a problem with time management at that point. That can happen, especially if you don't know that these performance-based questions happen to be there. Some people prefer skipping over the performance-based questions. They'll read them, skip it, read it, skip it, and they'll just get to the multiple choice as soon as possible, go through the entire multiple choice set, and then they will circle back, because in the CompTIA exam, you can go to any question at any time. You can circle back at that point, and then you can go through the performance-based questions. So there are some performance-based questions that are in different formats than what you might expect, because they can really ask you anything in any format because of that. They can't really ask you anything though, which kind of gets me back to, I think, the secret of studying for performance-based questions is to simply study the exam objectives. If you know the exam objectives, it does not matter how they ask the question. So for example, let's go to the exam objectives. These are the objectives. We looked at these earlier. Let's look at section 1.0 operating systems. This is the 1.0 domain. And the section 1.1 under that domain is identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. And they go through different Windows 10 editions: Windows 10 Home, Windows 10 Pro, Windows 10 Pro for Workstations, and Windows 10 Enterprise. Now you may be thinking at this point, what about Windows 11? Hello? Windows 11's been out for a while. If you go back to the exam objectives, they even have a note on this that says versions of Microsoft Windows that are not end of mainstream support as determined by Microsoft, up to and including Windows 11, are intended content areas of the certification. As such, objectives in which a specific version of Microsoft Windows is not indicated in the main objective title can include content related to Windows 10 and Windows 11 as it relates to the job role. And as you've probably seen in my videos, I show you often both. Here's what it looks like in Windows 10. Here's what it looks like in Windows 11. But there are sections of the exam objectives that spell it out. So in this case, in this section, Windows 10 editions, they really want to know about Windows 10. Windows 11 is not part of that. But then when they move into feature differences, technically it's really the same between 10 and 11. They're basically the same operating system at that point. There's not much difference between them. There's some UI things and a little bit under the surface, but not much. But you have to know things like domain access versus workgroup, desktop style / user interface, availability of remote desktop protocol, RDP, random access memory, support limitations, BitLocker, GP edit, and then you have to know about in-place upgrades. So I could think of a number of different performance-based questions here. For example, here's Windows 10 Home, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise. And here is Remote Desktop Protocol Server, BitLocker, and maybe Active Directory. I know Active Directory GP edit sort of here, so I threw Active Directory in that mix. Now match the feature to the Windows edition. Matching question. So if you know everything in this list, if you know these topics, if you've used these bullets as a checklist, and you understand how these fit into the big picture, then it doesn't matter what type of performance-based question you run into about Windows 10 editions or these features or the upgrade paths. You're able to understand the question and answer it because you know the objectives. So I really do think your best way to study for the performance-based questions is to really understand the exam objectives, because every question on your exam is going to stick to these objectives like glue. They stay very, very, very close to these objectives. To practically 100% of the questions you get are from this list, which means if you know every bullet that's in this list, you're going to pass your exam. That's how important this set of exam objectives is. So make sure if you don't have this list, get this list. ProfessorMaster.com/objectives, or simply go to your favorite search engine, CompTIA Exam Objectives. Those 3 terms. That will help you find it straight away. So absolutely do that. That's going to be an important part of you working through these exams, is knowing the objectives, so that doesn't matter how they ask the question. Doesn't matter in what format. Doesn't matter if it's drag and drop or if it's multiple choice. Doesn't matter if it's fill in the blank or if it's multiple choice. Doesn't matter if I'm at the command line or if I'm answering it from the command line of a multiple choice question. You already know the content. You're going to get it right. So I think a lot of us worry about the format. We worry that it's in a performance-based question format, but the reality is it's just another way to ask it's a fancy way to ask a multiple choice question. I think that's really, if you approach it from that perspective, it doesn't become quite as scary. I think a lot of this is fear of the unknown, because many people who've really studied their exam objectives have come back to me after their exam and said, boy, I really was so worried about performance-based questions. I was so freaked out that I was going to not do well. They were so easy. They just asked this, and it was a thing that I'd already studied. It was in the exam objectives, and then I answered it. That's how it's supposed to work. They're not trying to trip you up. They're not trying to create questions that are so complex that you'll never be able to answer them. They're not quite that crazy. They're not trying to manipulate us in that way. They really would like to see you succeed, and they want to present to you questions that really test your knowledge, but test it in a way that's not overly complicated. And they're constantly honing that. They're constantly trying to find that sweet spot. And they've been doing a very good job of that. So I would focus on the exam objectives. I think that's the best way to study the performance-based questions. Along those same lines, Anonymous asks, can you get a passing score on the A+ exam if you don't do well on the performance-based questions? Okay, so I'll give you an example of this one that another person came through. And this was very recently. I don't know if it was on the A+. I want to say it was for Security Plus, but it might not have been. But same story applies. This person said, I just came from my exam. I passed it. I got the certification. I'm now certified. But on my exam, I skipped over the performance-based questions at the beginning, just as I had planned to do. Read them and skipped over them. And then I got into the multiple choice questions. I kind of lost track of time. And so by the time I got to the last multiple choice-based question, the clock got down to 0. I didn't have a chance to go back and answer any of the performance-based questions, and I still passed. So a lot of people will speculate that the performance-based questions are worth so many points that if you don't do well in the performance-based questions, you're going to fail. If you don't get them absolutely right, you're going to fail this exam. That's on board. Actually, not true. At least not in that example. I think probably generally speaking, that's not true. I think that although we don't know for sure, nor will we ever know for sure how many points each question type is worth, I do not think it's an all or nothing game. I don't think you have to excel in performance-based questions to have any hope of passing this exam. And in some cases, at least for one person, they didn't have to answer any of them and still pass their exam. So I want to say that gives us hope. I want to say that gives us, perhaps we all could pass our exam now, knowing that we're not relying on those as something that will be required of us for this exam. So can you get a passing score in the A+ if you don't do well in the performance-based questions? You can get a passing score without doing them at all, at least in some cases. I don't know if it will be that way for every exam. For the scoring that is set up, it may or may not. But at least for one example, and I think it's a good one, the performance-based questions did not make or break them. Can it help? Yeah, it can. Can absolutely help. Ideally, they would have had enough time to go back and at least attempt some of these. You want to try to answer every question. Never leave a question blank. Always try to answer the question. The one thing we do know is that if you don't answer a question, you get 0 points. If you answer a question wrong, you get 0 points. If you answer a question right, in some cases perhaps partially right, you get some points. But what that means is that you can guess without there being a penalty. You can get a question wrong without them taking points from you that you've already earned. So that part's good. So at least we can try. We can make an attempt. We can take our best guess, and we don't have to worry that that's going to be detrimental to our final score. Take your best guess. Especially in multiple choice questions, you have 4 options, 25% chance. Just answer A on everything, or answer what you think the best answer really should be for that. I think that's a good way to approach this as well. Let's talk about taking the exam. This is this is something that is debated often in our Discord, on Reddit. People have different opinions of this. We'll step through it. Joe asks, which is better? Writing the exams at home or in the exam testing center? Oh, this is one where we can all sort of have, we're going to have to really break this one down. Maybe we'll have to do some type of physical challenge to determine who the right answer is. We're going to arm wrestle for this one. Which is better, writing the exams at home or in the exam center? Well, if you like being in your pajamas, writing the exams at home is better. If you like not worrying about your network connection or the way your room is set up, maybe the exam center is better. And I think it's very dependent on this. I would say if I'm taking an exam, I'll give you what my preference is. I don't like the unknown experience that could potentially appear when you take an exam at home. Think about a testing center. Testing centers are set up by Pearson VUE. Pearson VUE is the partner of CompTIA that manages the testing process. CompTIA is not doing the testing. They said, we can't do that. Pearson VUE, you already have the infrastructure for this. You already have the testing center set up for this. You specialize in this. You do more than just CompTIA. You do all these other companies as well. You can do our exams as well. And so there's testing centers already Pearson VUE certified to be able to give these. It's a room that's set up in a certain way. The systems are set up in a certain way. There are certain rules and regulations about the way the room is to be designed, about the monitoring systems, about the check-in process, about verifying that you're the right person, about locking your items away. There's a whole system set up at the exam centers for this. And when you walk in, you know that the network is going to be up and running. You know that the systems are going to work properly for this. You know that it's going to be properly proctored and managed. And that if you run into any problems, you've got somebody there to help you through the issues. There's always, the testing center is a known quantity. Now, CompTIA said, we want to give people the opportunity to take their tests at home. But your house doesn't have this pre-made testing environment. There is not a standard for the type of computers there. There's not a standard for the room that everything is located in. There's not even a standard for how they're going to watch and monitor you. I guess there sort of is now. So CompTIA worked with Pearson VUE to come up with the remote testing system that you could have at home. But this comes with a lot of rules. And many of these rules are identical to the rules that you would get in a testing center because they want to make your house just as secure a testing environment as an actual testing center. So for example, we look at what we're doing here. You know, we've got this setup that I have to stream with. You know, I've got a streaming device, my video switcher, the system that I'm showing you. I'm watching the chat here, and then we have all the slides we're doing here. I mean, it's a lot of different systems just to kind of get this whole monster going. There's a lot of moving parts to get all of this going. But I couldn't take my exam here because the rules say you can have one monitor. This is it. So I would have to you don't have to remove the monitors, but you have to unplug them. You have to show Pearson VUE that they are unplugged. So I just couldn't take it in here. There's no way they would approve this environment to take an exam. A lot of people just grab a laptop, they sit in a room by themselves, they lock the door, and that's their testing center, which is fine with Pearson VUE. That's what they want. But you also have to worry about internet connectivity. You have to worry about firewalls because they're watching you over your camera. They're listening to you over your microphone. And so they have to watch you during this exam. And there are certain rules about taking the exam. One that people bring up all the time is that you can't talk during the exam. So let's say you're taking the exam at home and you're sitting here and you're thinking, on your screen, the message pops up and says, which is better, taking the exam at home or in the testing center? Possible answers are, you're muttering to yourself as you're going through this. You can't do that. It's against the rules. And they will pop up a message on your screen that says, stop talking. You can't do that. And I think a lot of people will even say, but I'm at home. There's nobody here. I'm not bothering anyone. Well, it's not about bothering people when you're at home. But by the way, there is a rule in the testing center that says you can't talk in your exam because you're in a testing center. There's other people trying to take their test. So be quiet. That's really the point of that rule. At home, talking, it means that potentially you could have a recording device in the room and you are effectively dictating the exam questions to your recording device. See how this works? So they're very concerned about this exam being as secure as taking it in a testing center. So that's why some of these rules exist, not just in the testing center, but why they also exist at home. There's certain types of things you can have on your desk. There's certain types of things you cannot have on your desk. There's certain types of pieces of technology you must have, such as a camera and a microphone. There's certain pieces of technology you cannot have on your system. All of this is well documented in the Pearson VUE Taking Your Exam at Home website. So you can see exactly what's required of you. A lot of people who take their exams at home will post their results and tell about their experiences on things like Reddit and the CompTIA subreddit. This is one of those situations where it helps to do a lot of research if you're going to take your exam at home so that you know what to expect, you know what is good, you know what is bad, and if you run into a problem, you're not going to be surprised. So if you sit at home and your hand is over your mouth, you're thinking, which is better, writing the exams at home? And the message pops up and says, move your hand away from your mouth and don't say anything. Stop talking. Oh, that's right. So you can say, instead of being taken aback, what do you mean I can't say anything? What do you mean I can't have them? I'm at home. There's a reason for this. And they're really trying to get you in the right mode. But if you already know that you weren't supposed to have your hand in front of your mouth, and you already know that you're not supposed to talk, oh yeah, sorry, you're right. Got it. Sorry. Let's continue. And you're not going to be thrown by that. It's not going to mess up your whole exam experience. But then you also have to worry about, how's your internet? Is it going to stay up and running the whole time? If it crashes in the middle, there's a possibility that your whole exam could be thrown out, or that you've got to take the score, whatever the score was when your internet went out. And if you need to take the exam again, you got to pay for another exam voucher. There are people that will have multiple attempts at taking their exam at home, and it will be a disaster every time. There will also be people that will take their exam at home, multiple exams at their house, and they will never run into a problem. And both are happy to tell you this online. Well, I took 7 exams at home, different exams. I have never had a problem. And they're happy to tell you that. Yeah, but other people say, I tried to take an exam 4 times. Each time was a disaster and different problems occurred. Both are completely valid experiences. Both of them had these experiences, but now you have to decide which one's going to be better for you. So which is better? It's really up to you. If I was going to take an exam right now, I would go to a testing center because I don't want to have to deal with setting up my house or setting up a room or worrying about it. But a number of people live an hour or more away from an available testing center. Or maybe at your local testing center, there's no slots available and you need to get this exam done. So doing it online at home is a great solution. It's the perfect answer to that particular problem. Set up your system at home, do the research, understand what's going to be expected of you, and you're not going to have a problem. Just roll into the exam, take it at home, finish it, pass it. You're on to the next thing. You never left. You didn't even have to change out of your pajamas. That's the way you do it. So that's my recommendation. Neither one is better or worse than the other. It is really up to your particular needs and requirements and your comfort level and your network setup and all of these other variables. Everybody has a different decision on what's best for them. I know it's after the top of the hour, but let's go at least through a couple more. We got so many questions that came in. So I want to see if I cover at least a couple more here with getting things done. A lot to have to go through. This is a lot of good ones in this list. A lot of these are repeated, so I'm sort of skipping through as we go through this list. And here's one that sort of follows up on all of this. I have like 6 or 7 of these questions in different formats. This is a good one to kind of go through and kind of think about as we are going through these certifications. This one, if I put up the right screen, it's another one from Anonymous who says, after obtaining the full A+ certification, what sorts of jobs should I apply to? What would be good? The other questions I get on this, and it's probably very similar, I've finished my A+, now what do I do next? So this is sort of the point of these is to have an idea of what we want to do. I mean, I know in many cases people will say, do you have your A+? You should really go get your A+ certification. Oh, should I? Okay, let me go get my A+. Without thinking about why you're doing that. And the people that gave you the advice may be giving you good advice given your particular circumstance, but it's a much better idea to have a plan, to have a strategy, to figure out where you want to go next. And for many people, the A+ certification is sort of their first foray into the world of information technology. And very often, they have been given advice or they have been required, you need to go get your A+ cert, come back to me when you get that. Well, why? Why are you doing that? Was there a job offer involved with this? Is there a particular position in the company that requires me to have an A+ certification? But you need to know that going into it. And so this question from Anonymous is a good one. What sorts of jobs should I apply to? I don't know. What jobs are available in your area that are asking for the A+ certification? These are things we can do prior to studying for your exam. Prior to going down the road of earning a particular certification, whether it's A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, a Cisco certification, a Microsoft certification, a Red Hat certification, a Linux certification, a cloud-based certificate, whatever it is, we need to first understand the value. As I mentioned earlier, the value of a certification is based on what you do with it. So what are you going to do with it? What's your plan? What are you going to work on? And I think we should all be thinking along those lines when we are putting together the plan. This is before you start studying for a cert. How do you even know if this is the right certification for you? I think a good way to do it is to do research on what positions are available in your area for those particular requirements. So I think you should go look at the job postings in your particular geography. If you're in a big city, go to your favorite job posting website, go to the dice.coms of the world, the indeed.coms of the world, the LinkedIn jobs postings of the world, and sort of sift through these job postings, which will give you a huge amount of information about what companies are looking for, the type of experience they would like you to have, the type of knowledge they're looking for. And they often will tell you straightforward in the job posting A plus preferred, network plus preferred, security plus preferred, Cisco CCNA preferred, AWS, whatever it is, Microsoft this. You'll be able to know exactly what this organization wants. Now, sometimes they will not have a certification listed. Maybe this is a company that doesn't care so much about certs. Maybe they care more about practical experience and they're willing to pay more for those people. Or maybe it's a company that is willing to get people hired right out of school or right after their certifications, and they will teach them as they go. The business benefit from that, obviously, is they pay you less because you don't have the practical experience yet. This is one of the things that people often say is that experience is key. You really need the experience. What you're really hoping to have is experience. What if you don't have the experience? What if a company is not willing to pay you for the experience? Which happens. That's a different job. Then you need to find a different role at a different company where they do want that type of thing. Experience gives you options. Not everybody has the options available to them right out of the gate. So you need to find that right mix. But how are you going to know if you don't look at the job postings? Go out there, create a spreadsheet, build out company A, help desk technician 1. They want this as a formal education. They want these skills as a requirement and these skills as a nice to have. Now, I found another company. They've got a field service technician. This is the formal education they want you to have. These are the requirements, technical requirements for the position. And here are things they would like you to have that are not specifically required. So find all of these jobs, preferably the ones that have the A+ listed, but it could be any entry-level IT position. You should be able to sift through those pretty easily when you start looking and searching for A+ certification and finding those in the job postings. Those are really going to help you understand why you're getting this certification and help you understand perhaps even where you go after this, because you'll understand what all of these companies want. And once you look at the entry-level positions at that same company that asked for that entry level, are they hiring network people? What type of network jobs are they offering? What would they like you to have for network jobs? That's interesting. Are they looking for security professionals? Are they looking for database administrators? Are they looking for server administrators? Do they need Linux expertise? Are they looking for cloud specialists? These are the things that will help you create a strategy. You're not going to jump into a security job first thing. Entry-level security is not the same thing as entry-level IT. You need to build a foundational knowledge in operating systems and networking and security to be able to even be considered for those roles. But you're not going to get there unless you have a path that takes you there. So what is your path? We're all going to have a different path. That's one of the benefits of IT is we can follow a different way to get to where we want to go. But we need to, at least in our minds, put together the strategy. And one of the best ways to do that is to gather information from job postings, go to some local user group meetings. There's bound to be a Cisco, if you're in a big city, a Cisco user group meeting, a Palo Alto Networks user group meeting, a Checkpoint user group meeting, a technology consortium meeting. There are some organizations that are just technology organizations. Maybe you have a trade show that comes through town. Maybe there's a SANS training that takes place or a trade show like that you can visit, meet people, sit in on some talks, learn from other technologists, get a feel for what other people are doing in their roles, and then talk to them about what they're doing and meet people who are doing the things you want to do. Because the more you are able to sponge off them and learn from them, the better off you're going to be, the more prepared you're going to be for the jobs that are coming down the line. And you'll be able to maybe change your strategy a little bit. Well, I was thinking after this of going into Linux, but after talking with some of these folks, maybe the Microsoft certifications are better. Maybe I go get the Network Plus. Maybe we do something different. So you will be able to adjust yourself to this very uneven and moving ground underneath our feet that is constant in technology. Nothing ever stays the same. And next year, there will be another set of technologies that we weren't even thinking about today that they're going to need smart people to put into those roles. You need to prepare yourself for that when it happens. If you understand about operating systems and Linux and Microsoft and Mac OS, you can easily migrate that knowledge into the networking of those devices, into the security of those devices, into the data that's created by those devices, into managing those operating systems. All of those things apply, but you need the foundational knowledge first. So go get the foundational knowledge, see what other people are asking for, and that's going to be a great way for you to prepare for the next step in your IT career, whatever it happens to be. And by the way, the path you set up today, whatever that strategy ends up being, is going to change over time. So be ready to move when the current changes. And you may find that this idea that, oh, AI is going to be really hot and let's go into AI. Wait, everything got cold. Let's go back over to networking. You've got to be ready when those types of things happen in the industry. And the only way to be ready is to have a very broad foundation that you're able to build on. You're never going to know everything. Nobody ever does. And there's no way you can predict what happens next. And the next new thing that comes out is a new thing that nobody knows yet. So it is a green space. It's an opportunity for you to learn even more and position yourself as an expert in a field that maybe is very emerging. Might be some advantages to that. The only way to know is if you do the legwork. You have to put in the time researching, finding the jobs, talking to people, kind of watching the industry and what's going on. If you do that, you'll be prepared for whatever IT happens to throw at you. And I think that's probably where many of us focus our efforts when it comes to getting a job or getting that next job, is figuring out, where do we want to go? And maybe it's not that question you always hear, where do you want to be in 10 years? Technology, that's a ridiculous question. How would we have even known we could be here 10 years ago? So there's no way to predict 10 years. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing next. Forget about 10 years. Where do I want to be in 2 years? What do I want to do next? Whether that takes 2 years or 5 years. I need to figure out what the next steps are going to be for me. And the sooner you figure that out and either write them down, create a mind map, just put them in your brain and work towards it, you will be surprised how suddenly you are now honed in on getting to that path. And you suddenly are pulling in things you didn't think you were going to be able to, or even need to pull in, to be able to understand, incorporate into the strategy, and then execute on the strategy. It all suddenly happens very organically at that point. But you have to create the plan. Don't go into this blind. Don't, after you get your certification, say, okay, I got my cert. So what do I do with this? That's such a common question I get. I thought, well, didn't you think about that 6 months ago when you started studying, like why you were doing this? No, they just said I should get it. All right, now we need to sit down and create a strategy. So it's never too late. You can always create the path. You can always build out the strategy. Just be ready to do the research and be flexible with where you go from there. Well, I think that's probably a pretty good place to start. I think that's given us some ideas of what we can do coming up in the future. We got a lot more coming up. Of course, this is not our only live stream of the month. We've got other things happening. In fact, if I pull up my calendar real quick, I'll give you an idea of what we are doing next. We obviously had our A+ certification last week. We've got an our A+ certification live stream this week. And then next week on the 14th, Wednesday, not even a week away, we've got our Network Plus study group. We would love for you to come back for that one. And then the week after that, we do our Security Plus study group on Thursday, the 22nd of August. And that sort of wraps us up for the month of August. It's going by very, very quickly. We would love for you to join us. If you enjoyed this live stream, we would love it if you would give us a thumbs up. You might even want to consider going over to our YouTube channel, professormesser.com/YouTube, and subscribing there as well. That would be a great way to support what we do here. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Thank you for being in here in the first hour and answering my questions. Perhaps even more importantly, thanks for hanging out with me in the second hour so that I can answer your questions. We love to do it. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.